Morning, glory, America. Bonjour, hi, Canada. Hugh Hewitt on Tuesday, October 5th from live inside the Beltway. Have a good morning to you. I have a lot of news for the rundown, but first I have to tell you what I thought. Last night, going to bed, I was listening to the College Football Inquirer, which is a podcast recommended by Doug Lesmarie. So I thought I'd listen to it. Doug and his colleagues, Nathan and Stephen, do Buckeye Talk, which is the best single program podcast in America covering the Ohio State Buckeyes, and Doug recommended College Football Inquirer, so I was listening to it, and somewhere along the way in the course of that, it occurred to me when they were going down the AP Top 25 that college football is actually a red state deal. And I'm going to ask you about why. 1-800-520-1234. Alabama number 1, red state. Georgia number 2, red state. Iowa number 3, red state. Penn State number 4, the red part of a purple state. Cincinnati number 5, a red state. Oklahoma number 6, a red state. Ohio State number 7, a red state. Oregon number 8, a blue state and falling. Michigan number 9, it's the blue part of a purple state. Number 10, BYU is red. Number 11, Michigan State is the red part of a purple state. 12, Oklahoma State is red. Arkansas at 13 is red. Notre Dame at 14 is in a red state. Coastal Carolina is in a red state. Kentucky's in a red state at 16. Mississippi at 17 is in a red state. Auburn 18 in a red state. 19, Wake Forest in a red state. Florida, red state. Number 20, 21, Texas, red state. 22, Arizona, purple. 23, North Carolina State, red. 24, SMU, red. 25, the only pure blue state, San Diego State at number 25. So college football is now a red state phenomenon. Why is that? I should ask Guy Benson this, but why is college football, why are the programs that dominate college football in red states? I have my theories, but that's my big question for you. 1-800-520-1234. Now, the rundown. Gone in minutes, out for hours. Outage shakes Facebook. This trembled Twitter yesterday as Facebook, WhatsApp, and Instagram, Messenger, Instagram, Facebook, and Oculus dived into the ground and disappeared. Facebook resumed services after a 6-hour outage, according to the Times of Israel. The New York Times is the one that had said it shakes Facebook. And, of course, the Washington Post says, Zuckerberg's apologies have been a staple of Facebook scandals. Now the company offers defiance. I'm here to tell you I don't care. Yes, we use Facebook for this show to keep you up to date on stuff. Fetching Mrs. Hewitt loves Facebook. I don't care about Facebook. I use Twitter to advance politics and sports discussion. But if it all went away, my life would be the same. I still read books. I don't want podcasts to go away. I like podcasts. But, generally speaking, did you actually care? 1-800-520-1234. I know some of you depend upon it for business, and you probably cared. It's like my 2004 bestseller, If It's Not Close, They Can't Cheat, came out on the day of the Democratic or the Republican convention in New York, and they had a publishing house fail, and Amazon went down. It was in the early years of Amazon, and then the wireless at Madison Square Garden failed, and it was a total day to promote, and I didn't promote. That was kind of angst-inducing, but other than that, the internet is around us. It gets up, it goes down, people get used to it. Big, long story in the Washington Post. Supreme Court takes the bench after long absence, but things have changed. In a first for oral argument, the court, Justice Brett Kavanaugh participated by telephone from home after testing positive for coronavirus last week. The courtroom was largely empty, about 24 reporters scattered around the seating gallery, along with the justices' clerks. All spectators, including the arguing attorneys, wore N95 masks. And most significantly, Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg, who died a little more than a year ago, has been replaced by Justice Amy Coney Barrett, who was seated beside her colleagues on the mahogany bench for the first time since he joined the court in October 2020. This is a new year at the Supreme Court. It's a new reason to give to the Alliance Defending Freedom, which will be up there on every critical case having to do with freedom of religious expression, free exercise, and your First Amendment rights generally, your right to free expression, and the rights of the unborn, and separation of powers. If you care about speech and religion, Alliance Defending Freedom is for you. It is the new ACLU. The ACLU has just become a lefty organization. Alliance Defending Freedom is still out there defending every speaker, every religious organization. Please head over to HughHewitt.com. Wait for the banner at the top of the post to post up there, and then make your contribution. I ask you every day. I'm going to ask you every day in October, because October is the time we talk about Alliance Defending Freedom. But don't wait. You can listen to example Lydia. Lydia was mandated to wear a school mask, and she complied, but she wore the message, Jesus loves me. I'll let Lydia tell you what happened to her next.
Well, this mask I had said, Jesus loves me. And in the beginning of school, nobody said anything about it. Well, later on, the computer teacher said I couldn't wear that type of mask.
Now, of course, Black Lives Matter's mask and other political masks were allowed, but ADF swung into action and got it arranged for Lydia to have the same free expression rights on her mask as any other student, which is what the First Amendment compels. That's the Alliance Defending Freedom. They represent all their clients for free, which is why they depend upon $10, $100, $500,000, whatever you can afford to Alliance Defending Freedom. Please call 866-359-9644 and be generous, or just go to HughHewitt.com. Number of states with residents at 35% obese or more as a percentage of the adult residents rises from 9 to 16. COVID didn't help. OPEC opts against a big output increase, pushing oil prices to a 7-year high. Let me do a market check brought to you by Birch Gold. Now, Birch Gold is where I buy my gold. You can find them by texting my name, Hugh, to 474747. They've been a sponsor of the show for a long time. Or go to hughgold.com. Yesterday, the Dow was down 323. The NASDAQ got slaughtered, 311 points off, down 2%. S&P fell 1.3%. No way to tell what's going to happen today. Overseas, everything is up, though. Everything is up. But crude oil up to $77.78. For Brent crude, $81.54. Gold went up to $17.56. The 10-year Treasury increased as well. Inflation is here. Oil is showing it. Commodities are showing it. Stocks will rebound. That's because of the Financial Times. China property sector worsened deep. China property sector woes deepen as mid-sized developer defaults. Empty buildings in Chinese provincial cities, according to the Wall Street Journal, testify to the Evergrande debacle. And it is a debacle. It doesn't look like it'll spread to the United States. Stock futures tread water after sell-off early this morning, a headline. But treading water while Europe goes up isn't really a big deal breaker. Other headlines of the day. The South Pole posts the most severe cold season on record. A surprise in a warming world. Yep, but they managed to tell you that never mind, global warming is still with us. Don't worry about the extreme cold. Dr. Francis Collins, frequently a guest on this show over the last year, announces he is stepping down by year-end. Dr. Collins is a fine public servant. He's also, I believe, recognized that before people start calling for him to retire, as I did Tony Fauci last week, he's going to leave on top. Good for him. President Trump, according to the Washington Post, has been talked out of announcing a 2024 bid for now, settles on a wink and a nod strategy. Let's wait and see. Then the Washington, no, this is a story from the Lily. She was a stripper during college. Now she's running for Congress and sharing her story. Alexandra Hunt, 28, kicked off her run for Pennsylvania's 3rd District. When the strippers running for Congress get more attention than the veterans who've lost limbs, then I think something's wrong with the United States. Michelle Goldberg, a hard-left columnist for the New York Times, with whom I've appeared occasionally. What's wrong with Kristen Sinema? Nothing at all. But when you defy the left, of course, as one of her quotes says, describes you not as a maverick, but as a, quote, narcissist. I think she's invested in that self-image, personally as someone who stands up to her party, and I think she's really lost track of what is actually politically prudent, even to put aside the impact on the lives of millions of people, said Emily Kirkland, executive director of Progress Arizona, a progressive group that worked to elect Sinema to the Senate. There's a difference in turnouts between being a maverick and a narcissist. That's Michelle Goldberg, a narcissist. BBC may not exist in a decade, says a British conservative member, because of its extreme left-wing bias. Across Kabul, evidence of Afghans fast unraveling Taliban under the eyes of the Taliban is everywhere. And Iran has said they'll talk to us for $10 billion, according to the Wall Street Journal editorial page. I don't think so. That's the rundown on a Tuesday morning. Call me at 1-800-520-1234. Why does college football prosper in red states and decline to ruin in blue states, with the exception of Oregon, which is quickly fading? 1-800-520-1234, connection to the Hugh Hewitt Show.
Now.
The most powerful organs of the state are not merely corrupt, but that they've been weaponized.
We are now all rooting for his success.
That's not what happened. It was a complete ambush.
I thought it's early enough. Let's just send a couple guys over.
And the audience was, ha, 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 ha. How funny to set up an innocent man.
This is what third world security states do. They spy on their political opponents like this.
This is part of a concerted Russian influence operation.
Russians, I'm not going to be specific as
He knew he could just say it on TV and then hide behind, well, it's all classified, I can't get into it.
It divided the country in ways that people can't imagine. It's inspired massive violence. It's given people who are bad faith actors a license to do whatever they want.
Look for Salem Now in the App Store or go to salemnow.com.
Trending now on America First with Sebastian Gorka.
Pandering, overweight snowflake. What has race got to do with the last election and angry voters? Nothing. But you want to virtue signal to your political masters. If it's possible, let's ignore for a second that you have admitted you called the Chinese equivalent of the chairman of the Joint Chiefs, that you haven't denied that you gave him a heads up totally illegally because you have no role in the chain of command, and say, don't worry. If that crazy guy, the president, if President Trump is going to declare war with China, I'll give you a heads up. I'm on your side, you commies. I'm a commie too. Is that why in 2015 in combat at a NATO summit, you can see the video right there. He says, China, not our enemy. Really? Because China thinks America is her enemy? Why would you say that? And why do you think it's your duty to be communist China's man inside the Pentagon? Let's put that all to one side. Your love of bigoted propaganda like critical race theory created by Derek Hall, Biden's mentor at Harvard, which states, the textbooks state, if you are white, you are racist. You may not know it, but you're racist, which itself is a statement of bigotry.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe today at rumble.com. Trending now on the Dennis Prager Show.
Women are born ignorant of male sexual nature. It's not their fault. We're so different from women. There's no fault here, but it is the fault of a society that doesn't teach them that. And society always did, but not since the 60s, because they wanted to believe men and women are basically the same. So I'm curious, are you a religious home?
Yes, we are religious.
Right. So here's my theory. Religious Americans are less naive than secular Americans.
I like that theory.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today.
This is Carol Platt-Liebau for townhall.com. It's not inexplicable. Their silence is a scandal. But sadly, we've grown used to seeing the media try to influence public opinion in a way that benefits their chosen candidates. Let's hope that this time, Americans see through the manipulation. So long as America is being humiliated by a group of Taliban savages and our fellow citizens or captives, we deserve the full story. We should demand that the media give it to us. I'm Carol Platt-Liebau.
The Pepperdine Graduate School of Public Policy. For those considering careers in politics. Trending now on the Mike Gallagher Show.
Good morning, America. Hugh Hewitt, get out of bed, get going. Now, many of you know I believe there's a great division in radio between those who talk about news and politics and those who talk about sports, and you shouldn't cross the streams. But occasionally I will talk to you about sports, and I have a query. One of those 11:30 in the evening queries when I'm going to sleep to a podcast, fetching Mrs. Hewitt back today after tending to the grandchildren yesterday. So I am able to listen to a podcast when I wake up in the middle of the night and go back to sleep to the podcast. You hit the timer and finish the podcast. So I was listening to the new one, College Football Inquirer. Now I have a number of podcasts that I listen to. The Orange and Brown Talk by the Cleveland.com team. Civilized Barking by the Athletic Cleveland team. College Football Playoff Show podcast by Doug LeMaurice and Shahan. The Buckeye Talk, which is about the Buckeye. Now, you see, those are all verticals. Those go deep into a particular club, the Browns or the Buckeyes. And I now listen to the College Football Inquirer at the recommendation of LeMaurice, who said it's pretty good, and indeed it's funny. Very funny and very fun and fast talk. And good talkers are the same on no matter what their format, but usually the political talkers like me don't know anything except a few things about sports, and the sports talkers don't know anything except a few things about politics, and never the two shall meet. But I did listen to him run down the AP Top 25, and when I did, I said, my gosh, those are red states. Number 1, Alabama red. 2, Georgia red. 3, Iowa red. 4, Penn State. That's the red part of a purple state. 5, Cincinnati red. 6, Oklahoma red. 7, Ohio State red. Oregon is blue as blue can get. So Oregon at 8 is blue, but they're falling. Michigan at 9 is blue part of a purple state. Number 10, BYU red, red, red. Michigan State is a red part of a purple state at 11. By the way, do you notice how the Big Ten is dominating even more than the SEC, the top 10 teams? Oklahoma State at 12, red. Arkansas 13, red. Notre Dame 14, red. Coastal Carolina 15, red. 16, Kentucky, red. 17, Mississippi, red. 18, Auburn, red. 19, Wake Forest, red. 20, Florida, red. 21, Texas, red. 22, Arizona, purple. 23, North Carolina State, red. 24, SMU, red. And then finally, along with lonely Oregon, we have San Diego State, blue. Now, I have a theory as to why this is. But Paul in Florida, Sarasota, Paul, why do you think this is?
Well, I know, and I kind of missed it when I was trying to call when you started your listing of teams. Did you get Penn State in there?
Yeah, Penn State is from a red part of a purple state at number 4.
Okay, thank you. I was wondering how you're classifying. Yeah, it is kind of it is the red part of Pennsylvania, not to be confused with Philadelphia or Pittsburgh.
Absolutely not. So, do you have a theory? I have a theory. I want to know your theory. Why this is?
I think the theory is that people in the red or at least purplish part of the red part of states or the red states aren't taking the all the edicts and the social distancing as seriously in terms of football.
Well, I think it's related, but not the same. I believe that the red states attract the best football talent, especially football coaches, because they are not woke. They are the least woke of higher academia.
That's another good reason. Okay, that's another good reason too.
And these universities, which are the least woke universities, have the best sports programs because you actually have to be serious about sports, and you have to tolerate figures of authority who bring the law down on young men who need to be taught how to be men, as opposed to young men, and who run discipline programs, etc. By the way, this brings me to Urban Meyer. I got to read this ESPN report because this really ticked me off. Jaguars coach Urban Meyer said Monday he apologized to his team, family, and owner Shad Khan after a viral video surfaced over the weekend showing a young woman dancing close to his lap at his restaurant in Columbus, Ohio. Note, it's his restaurant. Meyer, 57, apologized to the team, said he shouldn't be a distraction. Good for Urban for saying that part. Then you find out he went to Urban Meyer's Pint House. He had gone to Columbus to visit his grandchildren after the game. He went to Urban Meyer's Pint House with his family on Friday night. They played on Thursday Night Football. Was seated at a nearby event, and people started taking photos with him. He has nothing to apologize for. He said he was a distraction. Local yahoos decide to embarrass Urban. Someone takes a picture of it. It's why he warned Trevor Lawrence about his bachelor party being in Las Vegas. Urban Meyer remains a great example of how to be a man in America. I'll be right back, America. Stay tuned.
Trending now on the Mike Gallagher Show.
You are witnessing a shameful part of history that is unfolding in the United States of America. We've got a president who was caught in a bald-faced lie about withdrawing from Afghanistan. We've got a general announcing to the world that we have utterly and completely failed. We have a general on record announcing to the world that we are guilty of a major failure.
It was a logistical success, but a strategic failure.
General Milley admitting that he was leaking and giving intel to book authors about Donald Trump.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube and at rumble.com. Trending now on the Charlie Kirk Show.
Instantaneous, momentary pleasure is a value the left understands that keeps their entire coalition together. And Fauci understood this. Fauci understood the zeitgeist, the spirit of the times. He understood the narrative that you do not cross that line. Now, we see this happen all the time, but we don't always talk about it. We don't always, those of us that are conservatives and actually love the country, we don't actually analyze the place that certain activist groups and ideas have over the other. Who gets the final say when there's a clash, when there's a conflict, when there's a collision? Another example would be, so the other side cares deeply about the Me Too movement unless it threatens Joe Biden becoming president. So Me Too matters a lot unless it gets in the way of controlling the White House. Power, the control of the federal government, then matters more than some sort of virtuous, righteous campaign to listen and to believe all women. Currently, there is an epic clash that the media is totally ignoring. Now, they are covering it here and there, but there is a clash between two of the favorite teams that have been created, fostered, supported, and aided over the last 18 months. You have on one side Team BLM. BLM Incorporated, racial justice, skin color matters. Now, as all of you know, after last summer of Floydapalooza, that group gets whatever they want.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today.
The Democratic Party somehow has convinced black people that they're the good guys. Never mind the skanky history of the Democratic Party. That was a party of slavery. There is a whole big cottage industry for racism. If racism went away, a lot of people would be unemployed.
The mob during the Minneapolis riots following the death of George Floyd. A bunch of white thugs, frankly, burning down the city's traditional black and Asian business district.
They're racist, racist, racist. Everything's racist.
Look for Salem Now in the App Store or go to salemnow.com.
Trending now on the Larry Elder Show.
But the first lie that we were told, the first lie that we know now, no one told Biden to keep troops in Afghanistan. That's what Biden said. Did you guys, by the way, hear the chants when Biden went to the congressional baseball game? I don't want to go all over the place here, but that's our commander-in-chief. He didn't get a great reception. But no one told Biden to keep the troops in Afghanistan. That's huge, right? That's absolutely huge. Biden completely lied about it. The guy's a habitual liar. The first lie the senators exposed was Biden telling ABC News' George Stephanopoulos back in August that no one advised him to keep 2,500 American troops in Afghanistan. And we know now every single one of them did, from Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin to the Joint Chiefs of Staff, regardless of how you feel about them and how I feel about them. Milley, the same is true with U.S. Central Command Commander General Frank McKenzie. So they all admitted that they had agreed with the recommendation to keep at least that many troops and that they were heard by Biden and basically ignored by Biden. McKinsey admitted, I recommended that we maintain 2,500 troops in Afghanistan, and that he was confident Biden heard all of his recommendations. So the question is, did Biden forget? Did Biden just ignore? You know, sometimes I go back and forth. I'm like, okay, with this guy Biden in the White House, how is he completely off of his rocker? Is he just unable or incapable of remembering anything past a couple hours or so?
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube and at rumble.com.
Welcome back, America. It's Hugh Hewitt. Ordinarily, I'm a hard news show, and I will get back to hard news. The president had a mini press conference yesterday. He was exhausted after 4 questions. I'll cover that. But I have a theory that I'm just putting out there for you about the AP college football ratings, which I've told you twice. I'll do a third time, and I'll be quiet about it. The AP Top 25 has 22 teams from red states or red parts of blue states. It has 1 from a purple state, Arizona State at number 22, and it has 2 blue states. Number 8, Oregon, falling like a rock after the Ducks lose to Stanford. Ooh, I know they had a couple of bad breaks in the game, but they did lose. I'm particularly bitter about Oregon because they beat the Buckeyes this year. But that was a fluke. That was before Trevelyan Henderson began to run. And then San Diego State at 25. Okay, so they barely made it in. So red states are much better environments for college football. Why is that? My theory is that the universities there are less woke, much more welcoming to the kind of college football coaches who are a throwback to dads in Leave It to Beaver and That 70s Shows. They're like Red or dads in the Wonder Years. They're all men. So the woke university systems don't really like men in college football. They don't. I mean, men. They might be Democrats, by the way. They might be Republicans. There are men in both sides. Joe Manchin's a man. So Debbie is calling from Pennsylvania on this topic. Hello, Debbie.
Good morning, Hugh. I had to grin ear to ear when I heard your commentary because it was obvious to me because the left absolutely despises masculinity. They want to bring in the new age of matriarchy, so they have to crush everything that makes men real men.
And that means the prototypical football coach, right, is an alpha. He's an alpha.
And people don't understand that football is about teaching men how to be defenders. And, I've said this over and over to people. Love defends. Men are supposed to defend their families, defend their towns, defend their nation. And, football trains them to be defenders. And so, of course, they can't stand the fact that, we're not, sitting there, how do I put it? Agreeing with this whole agenda of turning men into a bunch of pansies.
So woke universities are less likely to hire the alpha male who you need to run a football program that is going to be a winner. And it doesn't mean that they're Neanderthals. It doesn't mean that they are unenlightened. It means that they take seriously the project of turning young men into adult men. And that means showing up on time, discipline. It means drills. It means practice. It means mostly fidelity to whatever you agree to complete. It means manliness. Harvey Mansfield wrote a book on manliness a few years ago. It's not, by the way, limited to men, but manliness is very much a definitive set of values that are structured around responsibility and fidelity. And they are, and strength. not physical strength, but strength of character. Men can be men, be very diminutive in size, but it's just absolutely stunning how red states have run the table on college football. Even Penn State, when they're going to lose to Ohio State, will be able to hold up their head. I just want you to hear that, Debbie. Penn State's going down. I want you to know that. Bill in Sarasota, Florida, 1-800-520-1234. Hey, Bill, welcome.
Morning, Hugh.
Morning.
I've got a little slightly different take. It's a little bit more generalized, but I like the idea of the manliness culture in football. In a way, football can actually be sort of a metaphor for America, because you've got a bunch of individuals acting in their own enlightened self-interest for the good of the team and for themselves. And it's also that the red states, I think, value excellence, where the blue states value conformity. So you get a lot of mediocrity in blue states, and you get a lot of excellence in a competitive game from red states.
Well, there's something to that, because blue states are equality-driven, equality of outcome. Red states are equality of opportunity-driven, and you get a lot of walk-ons at Ohio State, at Alabama. You get a lot of walk-ons at Notre Dame. Rudy is the most famous example. You get a lot of people who are willing to give their all to try something, and they will rise and fall on their own merits. And college football is very much a merit-based system, right? There isn't a lot of disguising like national football's all. And so you will find individual Democrats. I'm not saying all football coaches are Republicans. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that red states are much more likely to produce a great college football program because they are much less woke than blue states. Thank you, John. Paul in Colorado. Good morning, Paul.
Okay, I am pulling over. Can you hear me?
I can. I'm glad you pulled over. You're safe.
Thank you. The original law that created land-grant colleges required their graduating healthy men to be coming out as military lieutenants, usually for the Army. And that's devolved into ROTC, but I wonder what the correlation is to these colleges being land-grant schools.
Well, there are a lot of land-grant schools on here. I believe Penn State's a land-grant, Michigan State's a land-grant, I think Ohio State's a land-grant. I'm not sure about Kentucky and Alabama and Georgia. I'm actually not even sure they're degree-granting institutions being SEC schools, but they may be. They may be. Certainly the dominance of the Big Ten in college football life and aspiration, it's where all the kids should go, by the way. By the way, they're going to, if you're a college football player right now or the parent of one, or you're a high school athlete, you should go to the Big Ten because they got the name, image, and likeness stuff down pat. And this brings me to the Kentucky quarterback with whom I have a beef. This came to my attention on the College Football Inquirer last night, and I believe this needs a shout-out. Kentucky quarterback Will Levis. Okay, have you ever heard of Will Levis? I may have to start a movement to ban him from the game. He not only eats his bananas in unorthodox fashion with the skin on Friday he consumed coffee, and he didn't put in milk or sugar, which, by the way, has always struck me as bizarre. He put in mayonnaise. Now, I am one of the people that believe mayonnaise should be banned, as did the College Football Inquirer podcasters who believe if you see a great sandwich in an airport and it's wrapped and you can see the mayonnaise, it's ruined. You can't have it. And people in America substitute mayonnaise for good taste all over the place. I am against mayonnaise. The idea of putting mayonnaise in coffee, which Levis does, disqualifies him from All-American status. John in Delaware. What do you think, John?
Well, Hugh, good morning. It's a good day to be alive. I think that you did the best interview I may have ever heard in my whole entire life talking to Dr. Fauci the other day. I just want to say God bless you for that, Hugh. Great job, man. It's about time somebody took it to that fella, bro.
Well, I don't think I took it to him. I think I just asked obvious questions. It wasn't hostile.
But the obvious questions, as far as they're concerned, oh my gosh, it was out of line. Did you hear the question? How dare he?
Well, I did get a little bit of that.
God bless you.
All right. Thank you, friend. I just thought it was an ordinary interview. Ron in Georgia. Hello, Ron.
Yeah, I think the red states
the people out of the red states and colleges and all this take more pride in what they do and how they do it. And the blue states are standing around waiting for a handout.
Well, again, college and universities are different places than ordinary citizens of these states. And by the way, I'm talking to Sanders right now. I know your Georgia Bulldogs look good, but prepare yourself. You're going to get crushed by Alabama. Only Ohio State has the weapons to beat them, and I'm not sure they'll be ready by the playoffs. So Sanders, just sit down and don't get so excited. The Georgia people get all up in arms. This is not a generalized statement about red and blue states. It's a generalized statement about about universities in red and blue states. And so I think the only way you can account for the domination of red state college football programs is by looking at the general political atmosphere of a state and how it might affect the university and their general intolerance for wokeness and their general tolerance for the sort of leadership that you need to captain a great football team, which is typically pretty masculine. Not a lot of Dr. Phil's running football programs. And I got nothing against Dr. Phil. I don't have anything against the Geico doctor who's trying to stop you from becoming your parents. We had a good laugh at the Geico ad about parking. My dad left in the third quarter of every Browns game I ever went to. We had to pull him back to his seat for the double overtime against the Jets in whatever year that was in the playoffs. I mean, he was like the original, where do we park? We park facing out. We got to be near the exit. I don't want to sit in the parking lot. And doggone it, I've got that disease now. And I never see the ninth inning of a baseball game unless it's a no-no, and or close to a no-no, or someone's going to hit for the cycle or something like that, because it's a genetic disability. But that Geico commercial is very, very funny. More on this, 1-800-520-1234 in a minute. Let me tell you about ReliefFactor.com. But first, let me tell you about Beth and Rich. They sent me this, my Kasori. You see that? If you're watching on YouTube or Rumble, that's a Kasori. It's the original automatic coffee warmer. I'm afraid to plug this in this studio because Generalissimo, this studio looks like Mr. Peabody's studio that would send me back. It was Dr. Peabody, right? The Beagle. And what was the kid named in the old cartoon? Do you know what I'm talking about, Generalissimo?
It was Mr. Peabody.
Mr. Peabody. And so you're Mr. Peabody. And what was the kid name?
It wasn't
Sherman.
Sherman?
Yeah. So I am the Sherman in this thing. So I'm afraid if I plug in this Kasori in your jerry-rigged studio, it will blow.
What my fear is you're putting a heating element into that part of the studio. You are a fire trap.
It's going to blow.
It's not going to blow. You're just going to melt the place down.
See, that's a dangerous thing. So Beth and Rich, I've got it right here, and I would love warm coffee to take my Relief Factor with, but I don't know if I can risk it. Here's my ReliefFactor.com. 4 miles after the show yesterday, terrific day in the Beltway. It rained on me. Terrific day. So I carry curcumin, resveratrol, and omega. Take it every morning. In this case, with lukewarm coffee, because I'm afraid of Dwayne's studio exploding. And he built it from scratch, and boy, does it show it. I carry curcumin, resveratrol, and omega all have one effect in common, one characteristic across the 4 different supplements. They work against inflammation in your body. Inflammation slows you down. Inflammation makes every ache worse, every pain more sharp. And that's why I take it every day, because if you're going to get older, you're going to get a little bit rustier, a little creakier, more aches and pains, and you're going to need Relief Factor. If you are working out, and you should, I do not like that stat I told you about. We are up to, how many states now have obesity levels that are crazy? From 9 to 16. 9 to 16. In 16 states, at least 35% of adult residents are obese. That's up from 2 years earlier. So the virus had a lot of people sitting around. Now, I did the opposite. I started walking a lot because what else are you going to do? I thought when it shuts down, you can't stay inside and watch TV all day, but apparently some people did. Time to change that. You can change that not overnight. You just start walking. A mile, then 2 miles, but ReliefFactor.com will make that possible. Head over to relieffactor.com. $19.95 gets you a starter pack, 3-week supply. I'll be right back with Drucker on the Hugh Hewitt Show.
Portions of the Hugh Hewitt Show are brought to you by Alliance Defending Freedom.
Trending now on the Eric Metaxas Show.
There are people today who seem emboldened in wielding naked power, in lying. They don't seem to have the code. They don't believe in virtue. They believe in power, and they seem less troubled. The journalistic class, the medical establishment, they seem to have come unmoored.
We're not alone. We have history to guide us, and it has been a trademark across time and space that the left feels that the means that you talked about are justified by their more noble ends, nobility defined as radical equality of result. And so they feel that what you call lying, the Russian collusion hoax, or Joe Biden, that son Hunter's laptop is Russian disinformation, or Anthony Fauci saying I had no role in the gain-of-function research subsidies. All of that is okay because the ultimate end, that is making sure that the, quote, people are equal or that they're fair, it justifies them. And they feel that they have a right that you and I don't have as superior moral beings to use. They don't call it lying, they call it a noble lie. When Anthony Fauci says on one day, don't wear a mask, then wear a mask, then wear 2 masks, or it's xenophobic to have a travel ban, yes, and then maybe not, he said himself that he lied about masks so there wouldn't be a quote unquote run on mask. And they've been doing that with everything. If you said, why did James Clapper lie under oath and say this NSA does not spy on people?
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe today at rumble.com.
Streaming on Salem Now.
The public would be outraged if they knew the truth.
Why do you think our politicians are not on the sidewalk right now talking to you?
Don't have no respect.
The old wall randomly turns into a guardrail, followed by miles of open border.
Human trafficking bar.
That journey is extremely dangerous.
The 7-year-old girl died in the desert.
From the country of India.
A great pillar of the community was killed by a man who had been deported at least twice.
This little urn contains the ashes of my son. His dreams cut short forever.
We're so worried about other countries' problems, and we don't even focus on our own.
Look for Salem Now in the App Store. Go to SalemNow.
Tesla was a genius. His most amazing discoveries thought to be written in a lost journal. Now, in the right hands, it could revolutionize the 21st century.
You can stop an earthquake. Doesn't that mean you could start one too?
That's why that notebook should never fall into the wrong hands.
Shall we stop this thing?
Save the universe! Look for Salem Now in the App Store or go to salemnow.com.
Welcome back, America. I'm Hugh Hewitt. That music means that David Drucker is in the house. David Drucker's book, In the Shadow of Trump, debuts, I believe, on October 19th. It is very timely today because there is a Washington Post story out that Trump is running a wink and a nod campaign, David Drucker. Trump talked out of announcing a 2024 bid for now, settles on a wink and a nod unofficial candidacy. What do you make of the headline?
Well, it's some good reporting, but, Trump has been running a wink and a nod candidacy since the day he left the White House. And it was pretty clear to me when I interviewed him for the book in May that he was running that he was interested in running again. He asked me, he's like, why do people think I'm not running? I said, who says you're not running? Let's just talk about other people that may run if you don't, which I finally got him to agree to do.
How long did that take?
About 3.5 hours.
Yeah,
But
I mean, you got to.
I got him there.
So I was told yesterday by a confidant of the former president that he is going to run, and that if he changes his mind because of health, but that he looks in great shape, that he's lost 15 pounds, feeling great, playing a lot of golf, loves talking politics, that if he does run, he's going to destroy anyone who runs against him. I mean, just take them out at the knees and turn on them. And if he doesn't run, he'll be supportive of them, hoping to freeze them for a while. Consistent with your understanding?
Yeah, well, look, first of all, we know that any time he's in a campaign, he tries to take people out at the knees. Again, nothing new. I think the thing to understand about President Trump, former President Trump, is that he loves being in the arena. He loves holding his big rallies. He hasn't tired of politics. He didn't want to retire from politics. And unlike presidents in the past who have lost, he's simply not going to do so. He wants everybody to think he is going to run because it allows him to maintain his leverage. I think in his own mind, he wants to run and plans to run. And I know that he tells everybody he is planning to run. He's not going to announce early because it would change fundraising requirements. He wouldn't be able to raise money for his super PAC directly. There are a lot of things he wouldn't have to be able to do, and a lot of things legally he would be required to do that he has no interest in doing and realizes, having been through this, that he doesn't have to do. And I don't think we're going to know exactly what he's going to do until he gets there. And I don't even think he really knows, although I think we know how he thinks. I think one of the reasons the talk has picked up is because after President Joe Biden's numbers sunk because of the Afghanistan pullout and the way that was handled and what we all saw on our television screens, he senses weakness in Biden that made him more emboldened, and the idea of running to avenge his loss became more possible to him. But I think we're going to have to seek sort of where he is and where the party is to sort of understand when these things happen, just how potent he'll be in a primary. We know how he polls. We know that he's a strong candidate. What we don't know yet is who's willing to run if he won't. When I interviewed Mike Pompeo for my In Trump's Shadow podcast, which is a companion to the book, I asked him, if President Trump runs, will you blatantly or, will you preclude yourself from running? And he wouldn't say that he wouldn't run, which I just thought was interesting. Whereas somebody like Nikki Haley has said, I will not run if Trump runs. So there are so many factors we're going to have to look at when it gets time for the campaign that is already underway to really get underway.
And Chris Christie has also told me it's going to make no impact whatsoever on him. And so someone will challenge him. And Larry Hogan's going to run regardless, the governor of Maryland, I think.
I think Larry Hogan will run. Obviously, he's in that one lane of we're going to do it differently, and we're not going to run as a Trump candidate. Everybody that runs, with the exception basically of Larry Hogan, is in some fashion or another going to tell Republican voters that they are going to be the next Trump in terms of policy, in terms of attitude. Some of them will have trouble on the attitude front finding an authentic way to communicate that to voters. Others won't. But that's what sort of Trump has wrought inside the party, is he is now sort of the North Star. Even for candidates that don't appear Trump-like, they will try and convince voters that you will get a different version of Trump, but a good version of Trump if you elect me.
Well, I am waiting for my reader's copy of In Trump's Shadow so I can get ready for our conversation soon after Pub Day. And so I hope it arrives soon, David Drucker. In Trump's Shadow, in bookstores everywhere on October 19th. You can pre-order at Amazon.com right now. I hope the book tour is shaping up nicely, David.
Things are coming together. It's my first rodeo, so it's a little new to me, but it's coming together, and I'm excited about it. And look, I hope people buy the book.
Don't do book signings in cities where no one has interviewed you. This is my one advice to everyone. I've sat in a bookstore alone for 3 hours, and so bad the staff got in line and kept coming around and felt bad for me. So only go where there's been publicity. That's my only rule. David Drucker of the Washington Examiner. Follow him on Twitter at David M. Drucker. Go get his book, In Trump's Shadow. Come right back for hour 2 of the Hugh Hewitt Show.
Portions of the Hugh Hewitt Show are brought to you in part by Key City Capital.
Trending now on America First with Sebastian Gorka.
Mark Milley admitted yesterday that for that pathetic pseudo-journalist Bob Woodward, for his new blockbuster dishing book of scandal, Mark Milley gave him hours of interviews. Hours? Sorry. How busy should the chairman of the Joint Chiefs be? Just curious. As the Taliban is ready to take back Afghanistan, these are interviews he gave this stinking year. This year! As the Taliban is rising, as China is building its military, as Iran is threatening us, as Russia is being ever more militaristic, you're sitting down for hours with an avowed, rabid Democrat, quote-unquote, journalist to give inside scoops on how you stood up to President Trump by undermining the chain of command that you by the Constitution are not a part of? What the hell are you doing? Maybe those hours could have been spent, I don't know, reading the Long War Journal by our friend Bill Roggio, where he predicted in March that the Taliban would be in control and Kabul would fall. Maybe you would better spend your time reading books like Cynical Theories, reading the works of Chris Rufo about what critical race theory really is and why it's racism and bigotry. But oh no, you had to be a politician.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe today at rumble.com. Trending now on the Dennis Prager Show.
When I started teaching, I was only 25. I was only 7 years older than my students. That's not a great span of time for between a man and a young woman, and it is a daily distraction.
That's right. It is. I thank you for your honesty. That is exactly right, and it is not his fault. He's built that way. It's no more his fault than food is a distraction to the hungry. Okay? There is no difference between the two. So I'll tell you an interesting story, really interesting. Many years ago, and I can't find this on the internet, maybe one of you can, and that would be of great help to me. I only remember that he was from a university in Indiana, but I don't remember which university. What did you say, Sean? So a professor did a study and found that one of the two groups, I don't remember the second, of men most likely to divorce were high school teachers. And I think college teachers. In other words, men around a great number of young women divorced at a greater rate than any other men. And I had that professor on with that study. So if you could find that, I could read it to you.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today.
Streaming on Salem Now.
The Democratic Party somehow has convinced black people that they're the good guys. Never mind the skanky history of the Democratic Party. That was a party of slavery.
He said, listen, I gotta give these niggas enough. Not too much, but enough that I'll have them voting Democrat for the next 200 years.
The race grievance industry would have you believe that blacks get up and think about nothing else except race.
If I tell you this is racist, yeah, I would get you emotional.
There is a whole big cottage industry for racism. If racism went away, a lot of people would be unemployed.
The mob during the Minneapolis riots following the death of George Floyd. A bunch of white thugs, frankly, burning down the city's traditional black and Asian business district.
They're racist, 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 racist. Everything's racist.
Look for Salem Now in the App Store or go to salemnow.com.
Trending now on The Mike Gallagher Show.
Look around. You are witnessing a shameful part of history that is unfolding in the United States of America. We've got a president who was caught in a bald-faced lie about withdrawing from Afghanistan. We've got a general announcing to the world that we have utterly and completely failed. We have a general on record announcing to the world that we are guilty of a major failure.
It was a logistical success, but a strategic failure.
General Milley admitting that he was leaking and giving intel to book authors about Donald Trump. This is a guy who so far has had zero accountability. Joe Biden, the president of the United States, has had zero accountability. Let's go back to what he said to George Stephanopoulos a few weeks ago, and then we'll take you to the present and yesterday's explosive, dramatic testimony by military commanders over the shameful, unethical, unforgivable lies coming out of the Biden administration and Joe Biden himself. Here he was with George Stephanopoulos a month ago on ABC.
Your top military advisors warned against withdrawing on this timeline. They wanted you to keep about 2,500 troops.
No, they didn't. It was split. That wasn't true.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube and at rumble.com. Trending now on The Charlie Kirk Show.
When there is a clash on the left between separate preferred activist groups, who gets preference? Who wins? Now, on the left, they have a hierarchy, not any different than a hierarchy that you'd have in any sort of organization. You see, when the left has a moment of disagreement or conflict, it is very important to realize that there is a structure of what matters more than something else. I wrote a piece for humanevents.com where I wrote, it was literally called, "This Matters More Than That." Now, a great example of this is when Fauci, the lockdown artist, the anti-freedom activist, mad scientist, who is the best example of the technological and scientific elite that the left worships. When he was even confronted by a talk show host, where they asked Fauci, they said, "So do you think that young people should stop hooking up via Tinder and basically having very promiscuous relationships?" And Fauci said, "Well, you have to understand there's some risk to that." He didn't denounce it because he understood that if he came out against.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today.
Powerful organs of the state are not merely
Joe Manchin had people on kayaks show up to his boat to yell at him. Senator Sinema last night was chased into a restroom. Do you think that those tactics are crossing a line?
I don't think they're appropriate tactics, but it happens to everybody. From the only people it doesn't happen to are people who have Secret Service standing around them. So it's part of the process. Yes.
It's part of the process, America. Morning glory. Bonjour, hi, Canada. I'm joined by Byron York, who wrote yesterday about Kyrsten Sinema, the Democrat from Arizona, who does not agree with the largesse that Democrats want to spread around the country. And in response, the New Republic called her a traitor. The Nation said how she has sold out the original story of the Senate's newest supervillain. And then Matt Iglesias, Kyrsten Sinema must be stopped. In the era of Trump, that would have been seen as a threat. Byron, well done yesterday. I don't think the left is going to ease up, though, on their new... Michelle Cottle in the New York Times today calls her many names.
That's right. I wrote it before the New York Times published the stories that said simply, "What's wrong with Kyrsten Sinema?"
Yep.
So, as a matter of fact, after the bathroom incident, which occurred in Arizona, she's flying back. Kyrsten Sinema is flying back to Washington, and she's harassed on the plane about DACA. So, listen. I think remember there was a period of time when resistance forces were harassing Ted Cruz. They harassed Sarah Huckabee Sanders. They actually a restaurant kicked her out in Virginia. And there were people like Maxine Waters saying that anyone who supports Trump should not find peace anywhere. You shouldn't be able to fill up your car at the gas station. You shouldn't be able to buy a gallon of milk at the grocery store without having to face the consequences of your political positions. Well, clearly that seems to be now directed at Senator Sinema.
Now, I do not quite get what the DACA activists are doing for one simple reason. The parliament, maybe they don't know that the parliamentarian has ruled that DACA cannot be part of the reconciliation process, regardless of what Kyrsten Sinema does. There's no way. Chuck Schumer's admitted that. So they must be arguing with her about the filibuster, but the supervillain on the filibuster is Joe Manchin, who, again, let's play what he had to say, cut number 11 yesterday in the Senate Hall. Joe Manchin, I think it's Manu, is up in his face, cut number 11.
Schumer has ruled out using reconciliation to move ahead.
Out anything. We just can't let the debt ceiling elapse. We just can't.
So does that mean that you're open to potentially even killing the filibuster?
The filibuster has nothing to do with the debt ceiling. Basically, we have other tools that we can use, and if we have to use them, we should use them.
Now, what I love about that, Byron, is that the media keeps the filibuster issue alive, despite the fact it's dead, but also that he's simply parroting Chuck Schumer's fact-check false assertion that they can't use reconciliation. The parliamentarian said they could.
They can. There's simply no doubt about it. But, you can only use reconciliation basically once a year. And it would have to be... The problem is that Democrats are planning to use reconciliation for their big social and climate spending bill. So if they have to attach a debt ceiling measure to that, then it would really have to be done by October the 18th. No way that's going to happen. So I think Democrats are saying there's no way we're going to... Reconciliation is the only tool we have to pass this bill that we don't have majority support for in the Senate. And there's no way we're going to use it to raise the debt ceiling and thus putting it off the table for our big spending bill. That's why it's a no-starter.
Now, I understood it slightly differently. I thought they could do reconciliation twice within 2 months, although it counts as two strikes. Nevertheless, they don't want to do it because they have to name a specific number in a reconciliation-enabled debt limit raise. And they don't want to put a specific number on it because they know Republicans will run against a specific number. I also believe history has shown that Republicans had to pass it on their own when they controlled all three chambers. I actually don't know what all the fuss is about, except that the media simply will not challenge Democratic talking points. Let me go to Dr. Fauci with you, Byron, because yesterday he took the scene. Well, let's go back to Sunday. Here's Dr. Fauci with Margaret Brennan on Face the Nation, cut number 12.
But we can gather for Christmas, or it's just too soon to tell?
Margaret, it's just too soon to tell.
Too soon to tell. Yesterday on CNN, Dr. Fauci, cut number 9.
I also said something over the weekend that was taken completely out of context. I was asked, what could we predict for this winter, for like December and Christmas?
I was going to ask you.
Yeah, I say you hold off on that I said, we don't know because we've seen slopes that went down and then came back up. The best way to assure that we'll be in good shape as we get into the winter would be to get more and more people vaccinated. That was misinterpreted as my saying we can't spend Christmas with our families, which was absolutely not the case. I will be spending Christmas with my family. I encourage people, particularly the vaccinated people who are protected, to have a good, normal Christmas with your family. But just the way all of the other disinformation goes around, you say something talking about a landmark of a time, and it gets misinterpreted that I'm saying you can't spend family Christmas time, which is nonsense. You can.
No, I'm not sure it was disinformation. Let's play it again, Byron, so then you can comment on it. Cut number 12.
But we can gather for Christmas, or it's just too soon to tell?
You know, Margaret, it's just too soon to tell.
Okay, so Byron, was it misinformation, disinformation, malign, spreading of anti-Fauci propaganda?
Well, I think he clearly said it's too soon to tell whether we can gather for Christmas. Wouldn't you say that's a fair restatement of what he said?
Yep.
You know, I don't know why he does this kind of stuff. I don't want to misquote Scott Gottlieb, but I think basically he said something like, get your vaccination and live your life. And that seems to be the best advice right now that we've gotten from authoritative figures. So, you know, Dr. Fauci is, what's the good word, the way to say it? He's a creature of the media. And I think he kind of thrives on setting off these mini controversies and then, in this case, trying to clarify himself afterwards. But he'll do an interview with anybody, and he says all sorts of stuff.
Well, he did an interview with me last week in which he said he'll never resign.
See, he'll do an interview with anybody.
There you go, anybody. But he's been here many, many times, and I always try and give him tough questions. But I went through the many CDC, FDA failures, and they are failures. His noble lie about the mask, the J&J pause, the failure to do ivermectin research in a timely fashion, the failure to do research on masks on children under the age of 5 in a timely fashion. Now the booster mixing of equity concerns with efficacy concerns. There is a long list of public health failures. Back to the original flawed testing they developed, back to the original failure to sign the alarm. Have you lost confidence in him, Byron?
Absolutely. I mean, here's the thing. Just as an observer, as a non-scientific observer, when I want to know something like, okay, what is the extent of breakthrough infections? What percentage of deaths are people who are double vaccinated or fully vaccinated? What percentage of hospitalizations? A lot of this information is rather difficult to find, or you'll find competing versions of it, in part because Fauci has not been a reliable source of the best information. And I think a lot of the debate that goes on, the uninformed debate that goes on, and I try not to be part of that, but I can be very uninformed. The uninformed debate that goes on is as a result of the government not being a credible source of the best information.
That's absolutely right. I also want to point out that the reality of bad faith critics does not destroy the reality of good faith critics. Good faith critics are people, and I put myself in that category, who have been vaccinated twice and gotten a booster shot, who believe in the science, who also believe he's lost his credibility. A bad faith critic might have been on against him for 2 years, and I'm not particularly persuaded by them, but I believe his good faith critics are pointing out he doesn't have the ability to persuade anymore. That's really an objective inquiry. He's down to 68% trust level 3 months ago. Do you think it's still at 68%, Byron?
Absolutely not. I mean, the thing is that when Dr. Fauci says something, do you take that as absolute gold? Do you think, well, I better do this? Dr. Fauci says so. I just think you can't actually trust what he says.
And that is a big problem should we have another public health crisis in the near future. We need new faces everywhere. Dr. Collins stepping down today is announcing his retirement is a beginning. Byron York, get his daily memo every day from the Washington Examiner. Follow him on Twitter at Byron York. Watch him on Fox. Come right back on the Hugh Hewitt Show.
Trending now on the Eric Metaxas Show.
Joe Biden doesn't even try to get a 51% consensus. He said yesterday, I came in and there were 4 million, that's all. Well, he knows there were 17 million people vaccinated. He just lied because he knew that the media wouldn't say it. And then people like you and I, Eric, and our listeners today probably think, well, how can he's non compos mentis. He doesn't even finish sentences. He won't answer questions. He doesn't try to build a consensus. He just says, pay your fair share and the tax. We're not getting enough taxes when he welched out on $500,000 of taxes, we're told. And yet the left would say, we don't care. If maybe this is liberated. You say that he's non compos mentis. What are you going to do about it? What are you going to do about it?
See, that's the question.
That's their attitude.
Do you think we'll be able to do anything about it? That's the first question.
I think if we get the vocabulary and we understand without being shrill, and we just say, listen, these are not Democrats, they're not progressives, these are hardcore socialist Marxists. And I know there's a lot of naive that follow them that may not be, but when you rename the country from 1776, basically its founding brand, to 1619, or you tear down statues, or you cancel people out, you're Jacobins and Bolsheviks. And you've got to say that to them. And then when you have racism to fight racism, or discrimination to fight discrimination, then you're a racist. Let's be honest about it. And we don't use that terminology. We don't say these are Jacobin Bolsheviks, and they're racist, and they want to destroy a country.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe today at rumble.com.
His most amazing discoveries thought to be written in a lost journal. Now, in the right hands, it could revolutionize the 21st century, but in the wrong hands,
If you can stop an earthquake, doesn't that mean you could start one too?
That's why that notebook should never fall into the wrong hands.
There's an old brown battered notebook in my office at work. You have to find it, take it, and keep it hidden at all costs. The G20 leaders meeting downtown, they're in danger. In fact, the whole of downtown could be in danger.
If we are to build the superhuman, we must first eliminate those who are flawed.
People are created equally. All of downtown, the high-rises were built on rollers to withstand horizontal shakes. A vertical quake this size could collapse half of downtown.
We have commenced the countdown.
Shall we stop this thing?
Save the universe!
Trending now on America First with Sebastian Burka.
Thousands of people watching this hearing today that are looking at you all and saying, I can't believe they're sitting there and not answering the questions and are trying to punt. I yell back.
Punt. The polite word for it. God bless Marsha Blackburn. You are the three people who may have broken the American military. That was yesterday during the Senate hearing with the CENTCOM commander, with the Secretary of Defense, and with the most senior military officer in the United States, Mark Milley.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe today at rumble.com. Trending now.
Thought to be written in a lost journal.
Welcome back, America. Hugh Hewitt. Dick in Dayton. Good morning, Dick. You're on the Hugh Hewitt Show. What's on your mind this morning?
Well, good morning, Hugh. What do you think of those Cleveland Browns?
Well, it's great to be 3-1, but next week against the L.A. Chargers is really going to be the tell.
Yeah, I think if they do play, that's their toughest test. Oh, Hugh, I really love your guest this morning. I learned so much from them.
Thank you.
It was great.
Thank you.
Great.
Well, I'm glad we got a Browns fan listening. I want you to know that Jed Wills is getting an MRI today, and hopefully Chris Hubbard will be back and we'll play the Chargers just like we did the Vikings to a win. Thank you, friend. I want to tell everyone about Charlie Dombek, who's coming up later in the show. He's with Key City Capital. I have never had a wealth advisor in a sponsored segment before, 21 years, because they never had an accountant on the team. Now, I have endorsed a wealth advisor before in Southern California on the KRLA market, the Money Guys, because they had a tax accountant in their team. I know CPAs are essential to understanding how to preserve wealth. Now, the Panama Papers opened up a lot of people's eyes, and now the Pandora Papers have knocked people for a loop. So I have invited Key City Capital's Charlie Dombek to come on today, because Charlie will tell you, I think, in the last segment of this hour, the first thing you do to save your money is get a great accountant to review what you are doing. You ought to call Charlie today, 817-796-6744, or visit taxslashing.com. You're not going to be a Panama Papers or a Pandora Papers person unless you've got billions. But you can save a lot of money with an accountant and a wealth advisor. And that's why Key City Capital matters to me. It's why Charlie is going to join me in the last segment today. Let's check the market, shall we? Brought to you by AndrewandTodd.com, other great sponsor of the show. Yesterday, the Dow was crushed by almost 1%, down 323, but nothing like the NASDAQ, which was down 2% by a total of 311 points. Shazam. And that wasn't because Facebook went down. That's a cycle, a rotation out of big tech and into the standard stuff. I don't get it. That's why I have mutual funds and Amazon, the only two things I own. Plus real estate and gold, because I'm diversified. But real estate, here's the bad news, and it's why you should call AndrewandTodd.com today at 888-888-1172. They are lenders with Sierra Pacific Mortgage. They soup to nuts your loan application to refinance your house or borrow money for a second house or an investment property, or to help your child, son or daughter, grandson or granddaughter, become join them in becoming a non-occupying co-borrower. You sign on the dotted line with them. AndrewandTodd.com will help you with that. The 10-year Treasury yesterday went up to 1.481. Now, 2 weeks ago, it was below 1.2 briefly. And now it's up to 1.481. So that's a 10% rise, or more, actually, a 20% rise in about a month in the 10-year interest rate. Now, that doesn't mean high interest rates. They're still in the high 2s or low 3s, depending on your credit, where you're trying to buy, whether you're using a jumbo or a refi, you want money out. All those different things factor into it. I never give you a specific rate. But I tell you that now is the time to buy a house. Do not delay another day. AndrewandTodd.com. Also want to remind you, over at HughHewitt.com, you will find my search engine. If you want to find previous interviews with Byron York, some of you love Byron. He only comes on once a week on Tuesdays. You can go back and find them. If you want to find the Tom Cotton interviews, you can go back and find them using the search engine. But importantly today, the last interview of the day, and it will be the podcast today, Victor Davis Hanson, BDH, is back. Always here to cheer us. Pop the champagne. He's a party over guy, not the lights are coming up guy. The lights in Europe are going out would have struck him as optimistic. VDH joins us in the last segment. He will be part of the interview with Hugh Hewitt later today, the long-form podcast. Now, I've told you I've become addicted to podcasts. Many people are out there. I think you ought to listen to the interview with Hugh Hewitt every single day. It makes you wise. The Hugh Hewitt Show, Highly Concentrated Hugh, is my second podcast. That makes you smart and informed. It's the rundown. But listen to them both every day. Subscribe. Leave a comment. Good, bad, or indifferent. Most of them are great. And then keep coming back in the next segment. I got Joe Biden's press conference for you next on the Hugh Hewitt Show.
Portions of the Hugh Hewitt Show are brought to you in part by Key City Capital.
Trending now on the Dennis Prager Show.
Women are born ignorant of male sexual nature. It's not their fault. We're so different from women. There's no fault here. But it is the fault of a society that doesn't teach them that. And society always did. But not since the 60s. Because they wanted to believe men and women are basically the same. So I'm curious, are you a religious home?
Yes, we are religious.
Right. So here's my theory. Religious Americans are less naive than secular Americans.
I like that theory. I concur because we speak of evil.
That's right.
And we speak of wrongdoing. Yes.
Exactly right. You're a joy. You're in Fort Worth. I don't blame you. I hope we meet one day. And your husband should give me a couple of cigars. There's no question about that. Isn't it interesting, folks? Do you know who probably the most ignorant women in America are about men? Women who get PhDs in the social sciences. I would say that a woman who got a PhD in gender studies or in sociology or anthropology knows less about men than a high school dropout from a Christian home. And they're the people teaching your kids.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today.
The most powerful organs of the state are not merely corrupt, but that they've been weaponized to go after perceived domestic enemies. And that's very scary.
Our constitutional democracy enshrines the peaceful transfer of power.
We are now all rooting for his success. The peaceful transition of power is one of the hallmarks of our democracy.
We don't live in the United States of America as any of us would like to understand it.
We have a peaceful transition of power process. That's not what happened.
They interviewed General Flynn, and they did it in what was a complete ambush.
I thought it's early enough. Let's just send a couple guys over.
And the audience was, ha, 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 ha. How funny to set up an innocent man.
This is what third world security states do. They spy on their political opponents like this.
This is part of a concerted Russian influence operation.
Russian interference.
They colluded. They were in on it.
He would constantly say, I have seen evidence of collusion.
Until this is released, I can't comment. I can't go into the particulars.
Russians, I'm not going to be specific. He knew he could just say it on TV and then hide behind, well, it's all classified, I can't get into it.
Well, it's classified. You can't see it. Collusion. You just got to be willing to see it.
New York's Daily News ran this front page, Trump is Hitler.
How could 62 million Americans vote for Hitler? Are 62 million Americans Nazis?
We really almost thought it was a joke. Like, really, you're not going to accept that you lost this election?
Then they see the Russia collusion narrative sitting right there in front of them and say, why don't we just say that he cheated?
It divided the country in ways that people can't imagine. It's inspired massive violence. It's given people who are bad faith actors a license to do whatever they want because they literally feel like they're fighting Russian spies and Nazis.
Russiagate has been the most egregious abuse of everything that was supposed to have been good about our government.
The thing that they were investigating the Trump campaign for is what they themselves were doing.
Trending now on the Mike Gallagher Show.
I also
also have a view that the withdrawal of those forces would lead inevitably to the collapse of the Afghan military forces and eventually the Afghan government.
Well, you were right, and it took 11 days for the Taliban to take over Afghanistan. Have you seen some of the images coming out of Afghanistan, by the way? They're real pleasant. Bodies being hung from overpasses, people being executed in the street, an Afghan show. Senator Josh Hawley put it best. Thank goodness for people like Josh Hawley and Marsha Blackburn and Dan Sullivan. The Republicans were certainly on fire yesterday in holding these failed commanders to have some sort of at least a public accountability.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube and at rumble.com.
Welcome back, America. I've never agreed with this song. The premise is that Granddad had an unhappy marriage. I am, of course, married to the fetching Mrs. Hewitt, otherwise known as She Who Must Be Obeyed, as in Hilda Rumpel of the Bailey. And it came to mind during the break when I got a note from my friend Ray and Lynn at Chautauqua in New York. I'm going back to Chautauqua next year. The speaking circuit is reopened. After a year where I didn't do any speaking at all, I'm going to Atlanta, am920theanswer.com, along with Herschel Walker and Brian Westbury and Alfredo Ortiz on October 13th. That's a ticketed event. Chautauqua's not. Chautauqua's an invitation event. And I understand, though, that Paul Anthony Rattacco is listening every single day to every single word. So, Paul Anthony Rattacco, welcome. I loved Chautauqua when I went a couple of years ago. I'm looking forward to going back. If you want me as a speaker, you go to Washington Speakers Bureau. It's that simple, unless I'm working for Salem. Or unless you have a long-standing relationship with me and I'm doing a freebie. No, I don't do it for free. However, I was talking with Robert O'Brien yesterday about the reopening of the speaking. It's a curse, kind of. You really do like to get out and meet people and talk to audiences. I like the fact that the radio stations are doing listener events again, like on October 13th, am920theanswer.com. Then I'm going to California for the Architects of Peace dinner. Then I'm going to interview Brett Baer about his new book on Grant at the library. I'm doing public events again. It's great. I guess Christmas can't be canceled when everyone's going back out to public events. That's simply the way it's going to be. And I am glad that that is the case. But it does involve logistics. I am not the strongest person in the world at logistics. There are people in my life, such as the fetching Mrs. Hewitt, who figure out exactly which door to go in and which door to go out and where to be when. I think airlines have become impossible to navigate online. They really just, you should be able to say, I want to go from Washington Reagan to Charleston in your Google machine and have them tell you 25 flights at different times and costs, beginning with direct flights with aisle seats available. That's what, I think you should be able to program that. That's not how it works. Google is a tool of its advertisers, and so I no longer trust it like the FDA. Joe Biden gave a press conference yesterday. I love most of all how he deals with questions which he has not thoroughly rehearsed an answer to. Cut number 5.
And I also have a question for you on Ethiopia.
No, I'm going to answer one. I'm not going to answer Ethiopia. Let's stick on the dead so we don't confuse the American people. Number 1.
You folks out there who are interested in anything other than his talking points, you're out of luck. I'm not going to talk about Ethiopia. I am going to give him credit for repeating back the term Ethiopia, but I already played for you his non-defensive Christian Sinema being followed into the ladies' room by a DACA activist who somehow does not know that DACA is not eligible for the reconciliation bill by ruling of the parliamentarian, which has nothing to do with Kristen Sinema, the Democrat from Arizona, who's against spending all the money of the DACA people out there for the next 50 years in a $3.5 trillion boondoggle authored by Bernie Sanders, because she actually believes in re-election and serving the people of Arizona who don't want it either. There aren't any socialists elected in Arizona. There's one socialist, Bernie Sanders, and maybe there are a couple of socialists, and then we've got AOC, of course, and the squad, but they generally are not representative of America, but of a wacky sliver of the far left. And so she gets followed by an activist in the bathroom, and not surprisingly, a member of the White House press corps says to Joe Biden, "What do you think about that?" And he said, cut number 6.
Joe Manchin had people on kayaks show up to his boat to yell at him. Senator Sinema last night was chased into a restroom. Do you think that those tactics are crossing a line?
I don't think they're appropriate tactics, but it happens to everybody. From the only people it doesn't happen to are people who have Secret Service standing around them. It's part of the process, yes.
Part of the process. You know, a healthy denunciation of extremist tactics would have been useful from the commander-in-chief. The president, however, had a message to deliver. It's that Republicans are bad. And that was his message yesterday. Cut number 7.
Folks, watching at home, you should know this is the Republican position. Here's it is. They won't vote to raise the debt limit to cover their own spending. Democrats voted with them to cover that spending the previous 4 years. They say Democrats should do it alone. But then they're threatening to use a procedural power called the filibuster, meaning that we'd have to get 60 votes, not 50 votes, to increase the debt limit. This would block the Democrats from meeting our obligations and responsibilities to prevent Congress from raising the debt limit. So let's be clear. Not only are Republicans refusing to do their job, they're threatening to use their power, to prevent us from doing our job, saving the economy from a catastrophic event.
That is a tissue of lies, and I'll come back and explain why, but let's listen to round 2 of Joe Biden condemning the Republicans as evil nation destroyers. Cut number 8.
We're not expecting Republicans to do their part. They made that clear from the beginning. We tried asking to no avail. We're just asking them not to use procedural tricks to block us from doing the job that they won't do. Meteor is headed to crash into our economy. Democrats are willing to do all the work stopping it. Republicans just have to let us do our job. Just get out of the way. If you don't want to help save the country, get out of the way so you don't destroy it. We don't have time to delay with elaborate procedural schemes, which Republicans' proposals require. Scores of votes without any certainty at all, many of which have nothing to do with the debt limit at all. And that's when accidents happen. In the days ahead, even before the default date, people may see the value of their retirement accounts shrink. They may see interest rates go up, which will ultimately raise their mortgage payments and car payments. And the American people, look, I just say it this way. As soon as this week, your savings in your pocketbook could be directly impacted by this Republican stunt. It's as simple as that. Republicans say they will not do their part to avoid this needless calamity. So be it. But they need to stop playing Russian roulette with the U.S. economy.
Now, here's the reality. 4 months ago, Mitch McConnell said, and Kevin McCarthy agreed, that since the Democrats had cut the Republicans out of the budget process 100% and passed a budget with 50 votes plus the vice president in a 50-50 Senate, they would not participate in raising the debt limit. The Republicans had not done that in previous years. They had not cut Democrats out of the budget. They did cut them out of the Trump tax cuts when they objected to that. They did not cut them out of the budget process after the Trump tax cuts passed. Now, the Republicans said 4 months ago, We're not going to help you. You've shuttered us out of this economy-destroying, inflation-fueling $3.5 trillion spending splurge by Bernie Sanders, which is 4 times the amount spent by President Obama in the first year of his stimulus fiasco. And $3.5 trillion is 4 times what Obama spent on the stimulus. And Biden comes out and says the Republicans want to wreck the economy. No, the Republicans say, use your legislative power, the reconciliation process, which you cut us out from, to raise the debt limit, as well as taxes and spending. It's a very straightforward position. It does require them to go through reconciliation. It does require them to go through the vote-a-rama. I will talk to Tom Cotton about that next hour, which is the cost of doing business when you want to govern as a majority and as a supermajority when you haven't got a supermajority. The Republicans are right to say no. The Democrats are wrong to play chicken. The Republicans are not going to blink, and anything bad that happens to your pocketbook or to your savings or to interest rates are because the Democrats are refusing to do their job. So if you compare what I just told you, which is the truth, with what Joe Biden just read to you poorly from a teleprompter, don't believe President Biden. Believe me. Jen Psaki went out there and tried to clean up the sort of mess that President Biden made. Cut number 2.
He also said right after he made that statement, the next sentence was, I can't imagine that would happen, which I think is important context for people to understand. It requires Congress acting. That is the one path forward. That is why we are talking about it, why he gave remarks today, why we are continuing to press forward to get this done.
Yes, but so is the White House or the administration preparing for the worst in case that does not happen?
There isn't another option. It has to pass legislatively. That's what has to happen.
There is a reconciliation option. Jen Psaki is lying. I would like to know why the White House press doesn't ask, why did the president not take a question on Ethiopia? Why does the president not take questions? When will the president take questions? Donald Trump took questions every day. You might not have liked his style, but he was available to the American people. Jen Psaki also did not stand up for Christian Sinema as strongly as one might have expected. Cut number 4.
Well, let me be clear here, because I think the context of what happened here is very important. And Senator Sinema put out a statement this morning. So as she said, and I would reiterate from here, the protection of the freedom to protest, to speak out, and to criticize is fundamental to our democracy. The president believes that. Maybe he shorthanded it, but he wanted to make that clear this morning. What happened this weekend was that her classroom, her students, and the safe and intellectually stimulating environment she's worked to create during the years she's of teaching at ASU was breached. That's inappropriate and unacceptable. And I think the context of what happened here is important, despite the fact that, of course, the president stands for the fundamental right of people to protest, to object, to criticize, as they often do outside of the gates of the White House.
So does the White House condemn these protesters who chased her into the rally?
I just said it was inappropriate and unacceptable. I think that pretty much
not to do that again.
I think that's pretty clear that they shouldn't.
It's not pretty clear. When you don't say don't follow people into the bathroom, it's not clear. Jen Psaki is not clear. Sarah Huckabee Sanders wouldn't get away with it. The answer is no, don't follow people into the bathroom. That's gross. Not that hard. Let me remind you, Alliance Defending Freedom will protect the right to protest anywhere at any time because they are free speech advocates. I need your help in funding Alliance Defending Freedom. They support your religious right to gather against mass shutdowns and mandates. They protect your right to go to homeschool. They protect your right to protest at abortion clinics. They protect your right to worship as you choose. Alliance Defending Freedom has a banner over at hughhewitt.com. Let it load, and please be as generous as possible. The Supreme Court is back at work. We need ADF there with them. ReliefFactor.com, longtime sponsor of the show, every single hour of every single broadcast. For most of the 21 years, I believe they've been on for 11 years. I'm not sure. ReliefFactor.com, I take it every morning. Why? Because most days, unless it's raining cats and dogs, I'm out there. As soon as the show's over, out I go. And why? Because usually mid-morning inside the Beltway, usually a beautiful time to walk, particularly in September, October, and November, or trundle or run infrequently, less frequently than before. But ReliefFactor.com makes it possible. Doing your workouts with weights, and Colonel, I'm not going to tell people about the pink weights. You told me not to. I'm not going to tell people about them. I talked to Colonel yesterday, had his shoulder replaced, and he's working out every day as well. And I recommend Relief Factor to him, to everyone. Go get it. $19.95 gets you started. Charlie Dombek joins me next, America. Stay tuned.
Portions of the Hugh Hewitt Show are brought to you by Alliance Defending Freedom.
Trending now on the Charlie Kirk Show.
So who wins when there is a clash on the left between separate preferred activist groups? Who gets preference? Who wins? Now, on the left, they have a hierarchy. Not any different than a hierarchy that you'd have in any sort of organization. You see, when the left has a moment of disagreement or conflict, it is very important to realize that there is a structure of what matters more than something else.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today.
Streaming on Salem Now.
¿Cuánto queda?
No queda nada. Que lo siento mucho.
And that's the only time you can come to Christ, when the Spirit of God calls you to the cross. Don't you hesitate.
Have you ever thought of going to seminary?
Madre, Padre, ¿quién está listo para ser transformado por el poder de su palabra?
Look for Salem Now in the App Store or go to salemnow.com.
I grew up poor, which is even worse than being poor.
We would have sandwiches with no meat.
My American dream entailed working hard and making $20,000 a year. But I surpassed that goal and became a corporate CEO.
We'll all be able to say, free at last, free at last.
Look for Salem Now in the App Store or go to salemnow.com. Salem Now.
The public would be outraged if they knew the truth.
Why do you think our politicians are not on the sidewalk right now talking to you?
Don't have no respect.
The old wall randomly turns into a guardrail, followed by miles of open border. Human trafficking gone.
That journey is extremely dangerous.
The 7-year-old girl died in the desert.
From the country of India.
A great pillar of the community was killed by a man who had been deported at least twice.
This little urn contains the ashes of my son. His dreams cut short forever.
We're so worried about other countries' problems, and we don't even focus on our own.
Look for Salem Now in the App Store or go to Salem Now. Salem Now.
Tesla was a
Welcome back, America. I want you to remember the words Key City Capital. KeyCityCapital.com. For the first time in 21 years on the air, I have allowed a wealth advisory firm to sponsor a segment. Not only allowed it, invited it. I got a call from Charlie Dombek of Key City Capital. They listen to my show, and they've heard me talk about the coming financial troubles and what I think Brian Westbury agrees with me on. And they said, can we talk to you? And I said, sure. I'm not sure I'm going to let a financial firm on the air with me in a sponsored segment. He said, let me come talk to you. So he came to D.C. We spent hours together. He answered all of my questions. My number one question, have you ever been sued? No. Have you ever been subject to SEC regulatory enforcement? No. What's your average rate of return for your clients? He told me that. And so I said to Charlie, there are tough times coming. Come on the show and explain them. He said yes. And Charlie is that dreaded thing that we all need, a very good accountant. Good morning, Charlie.
Good morning, Hugh.
How'd you like your introduction?
It was a wonderful introduction. Thank you very much. Quite
Would you begin by telling people your background and your resume so they know we are talking with a smart guy, which is the first thing I went over. I want to know where Charlie went to school, what he's done, what he's mastered before we got into his investment approach.
That sounds good, Hugh. Thanks. My background is in accounting. I've been a practicing CPA essentially for nearly 30 years. I started my career at Ernst & Young back in the 80s and worked as a tax planner for most of my life. About 15 years ago, I formed my own firm to address what I viewed as weaknesses in terms of how clients got served, primarily by their CPA. And what I had found over a career of work is that most CPAs or historians were pretty good at telling a story that occurred in the past. Oftentimes, CPAs tell you how much money you made, how much you owe, when and where to file your taxes, and oftentimes how to write large checks at the last minute when you least expect it. And I set out to form my firm for the sole purpose of helping clients recover dollars they unnecessarily pay in the form of state and federal income taxes, and built a very successful practice on that simple value proposition that we're going to do for others what CPAs don't do, which is have conversations, help clients control the cost of taxation in their financial life.
Now, that is step one at Key City Capital, and we went over that. There are a lot of people with wealth and a lot of people with middle-class aspirations to the upper class who are blocked by taxes. And in fact, the Panama Papers 5 years ago and now the Pandora Papers are full of tales of how very wealthy people avoid taxes, Charlie. By the way, it's not illegal. It's actually, I think, the responsibility of an informed citizenry to avoid taxes. We are not telling people not to pay their taxes. We're telling people avoid taxes, minimize taxes. That's the best way to grow your wealth. Am I correct about your observation agreeing with mine?
You're absolutely correct. We're going to volunteer to pay tax on the income that we need to live off to support the cash flow need in our lifestyle, but we're going to work diligently in accordance with the Internal Revenue Code to move dollars that we're earning that we don't need today into environments where we have more control, into tax-deferred strategies and potentially into tax-exempt strategies like Roth IRAs. And if you think about it, there's really never been a more important time to have a tax strategy. We have to prepare for what I call the Biden 911 tax attack. If you look at some of the proposals, they represent one of the largest tax increases in American history. And those impacted will shoulder probably the largest economic burden since World War II. And you don't think you're rich? Well, our government does. You can afford to pay more, right? Kind of Joe needs you. So, and possibly even more troubling is the government wants to invest as much as $80 billion into IRS enforcement, effectively creating an army of accounting police with the sole purpose of scouring our 1040s for additional tax dollars.
Now, that's why you opened up the website taxslashing.com. It's easier to remember than Key City Capital, perhaps, but I want you to remember both, taxslashing.com, keycitycapital.com. So, do you believe, for example, that stepped-up basis is on the abyss, is on the edge of the abyss? Because if it is, it's going to change the lives of tens of millions of Americans, and they won't even know it happened.
Well, it's certainly in the Biden's family plan, and we have a couple of proposals out there. We have what the House Democrats want to enact, which is not as pervasive as what the Biden administration wants, and it changes every day, literally, and we just have to keep track of what's happening legislatively and be prepared for ultimately what comes out in the tax code. I am hoping that the step up in basis does not leave us. I think it's important to be able to pass your wealth onto your heirs and have the ability to effectively benefit future generations.
So let me close our first get-together. We're going to do this for 7 weeks. It's going to be Finance 101 with Charlie Dombek of Key City Capital, taxslashing.com. The first step in any investment service ought to be a thorough review, not only of next year's taxes, but of past year taxes. And you go back and get money back that was owed, that was not necessarily paid, right?
That's correct. The first step in the process is a comprehensive plan. And at Key City Capital, we're what I call a wealth acceleration company, where not only do we help clients recover dollars unnecessarily paid in the form of state and federal income taxes, we help them grow their wealth rapidly through a combination of investment strategies that diversify against inflation risk and what potentially is the perfect storm for a market correction.
More coming ahead in the weeks ahead. Go to Key City Capital. Come right back for Hour 3 of Hugh Hewitt. Thank you, Charlie Dombek.
Now.
The most powerful organs of the state are not merely corrupt, but that they've been weaponized.
We are now all rooting for his success.
That's not what happened. It was a complete ambush.
I thought it's early enough. Let's just send a couple guys over.
And the audience was, ha, 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 ha. How funny to set up an innocent man.
This is what third world security states do. They spy on their political opponents like this.
This is part of a concerted Russian influence operation.
Russians, I'm not going to be specific as
he knew he could just say it on TV and then hide behind, well, it's all classified, I can't get into it.
It divided the country in ways that people can't imagine. It's inspired massive violence. It's given people who are bad faith actors a license to do whatever they want.
Look for Salem Now in the App Store or go to salemnow.com.
Trending now on America First with Sebastian Gorka.
Pandering, overweight snowflake. What has race got to do with the last election and angry voters? Nothing. But you want to virtue signal to your political masters. If it's possible, let's ignore for a second that you have admitted you called the Chinese equivalent of the chairman of the Joint Chiefs, that you haven't denied that you gave him a heads up totally illegally because you have no role in the chain of command, and say, don't worry. If that crazy guy, the president, if President Trump is going to declare war with China, I'll give you a heads up. I'm on your side, you commies. I'm a commie too. Is that why in 2015 in combat at a NATO summit, you can see the video right there. He says, China, not our enemy. Really? Because China thinks America is her enemy? Why would you say that? And why do you think it's your duty to be communist China's man inside the Pentagon? Let's put that all to one side. Your love of bigoted propaganda like critical race theory created by Derek Hall, Biden's mentor at Harvard, which states, the textbooks state, if you are white, you are racist. You may not know it, but you're racist, which itself is a statement of bigotry.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe today at rumble.com. Trending now on The Dennis Prager Show.
Women are born ignorant of male sexual nature. It's not their fault. We're so different from women. There's no fault here, but it is the fault of a society that doesn't teach them that. And society always did, but not since the 60s, because they wanted to believe men and women are basically the same. So I'm curious, are you a religious home?
Yes, we are religious.
Right. So here's my theory. Religious Americans are less naive than secular Americans.
I like that theory.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today.
This is Carol Platt-Liebau for townhall.com. It's not surprising that Joe Biden wants to turn the page on his incompetent withdrawal from Afghanistan and the abandonment of U.S. citizens and our allies there. Almost as unsurprising as the media's craven effort to help him. Even as Americans remain hostage in Afghanistan and the Taliban flaunts the military equipment we left them, the news has shifted to other domestic stories. It's inexplicable. Their silence is a scandal. But sadly, we've grown used to seeing the media try to influence public opinion in a way that benefits their chosen candidates. Let's hope that this time Americans see through the manipulation. So long as America is being humiliated by a group of Taliban savages and our fellow citizens are captives, we deserve the full story. We should demand that the media give it to us. I'm Carol Platt-Liebau.
The Pepperdine Graduate School of Public Policy. For those considering careers in politics. Trending now on The Mike Gallagher Show.
You are witnessing a shameful part of history that is unfolding in the United States of America. We've got a president who was caught in a bald-faced lie about withdrawing from Afghanistan. We've got a general announcing to the world that we have utterly and completely failed. We have a general on record announcing to the world that we are guilty of a major failure.
It was a logistical success, but a strategic failure.
General Milley admitting that he was leaking and giving intel to book authors about Donald Trump.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube and at rumble.com. Trending now on The Charlie Kirk Show.
Instantaneous, momentary pleasure is a value the left understands that keeps their entire coalition together. And Fauci understood this. Fauci understood the zeitgeist, the spirit of the times. He understood the narrative that you do not cross that line. Now, we see this happen all the time, but we don't always talk about it. We don't always, those of us that are conservatives and actually love the country, we don't actually analyze the place that certain activist groups and ideas have over the other. Who gets the final say when there's a clash, when there's a conflict, when there's a collision? Another example would be, so the other side cares deeply about the Me Too movement unless it threatens Joe Biden becoming president. So Me Too matters a lot unless it gets in the way of controlling the White House. Power, the control of the federal government, then matters more than some sort of virtuous, righteous campaign to listen and to believe all women. Currently, there is an epic clash that the media is totally ignoring. Now, they are covering it here and there, but there is a clash between two of the favorite teams that have been created, fostered, supported, and aided over the last 18 months. You have on one side Team BLM. BLM Incorporated, racial justice, skin color matters. Now, as all of you know, after last summer of Floydapalooza, that group gets whatever they want.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today.
The Democratic Party somehow has convinced black people that they're the good guys. Never mind the skanky history of the Democratic Party. That was a party of slavery. There is a whole big cottage industry for racism. If racism went away, a lot of people would be unemployed.
The mob during the Minneapolis riots following the death of George Floyd. A bunch of white thugs, frankly, burning down the city's traditional black and Asian business district.
They're racist. Everything's racist.
Look for Salem Now in the App Store or go to Salem Now.
Tesla was a genius. His most amazing discoveries thought to be written in a lost journal. Now, in the right hands, it could revolutionize the 21st century.
You can stop an earthquake. Doesn't that mean you could start one too?
That's why that notebook should never fall into the wrong hands.
Shall we stop this thing?
Save the universe!
Look for Salem Now in the App Store or go to salemnow.com.
Morning, glory, America. Bonjour, hi, Canada. I'm Hugh Hewitt inside the Beltway on Tuesday, October 5th, live. Bringing you a story that just came up on the New York Times. Now, it's a life-changing story for many families. It will not affect most Americans, the vast majority of Americans, directly. It indirectly affects all of us because it involves law enforcement and it involves drugs coming into the country. And I want you to hear it and understand why it's so important that we support law enforcement and not defund the police and not defund the DEA and not defund the FBI and not demonize anyone but support them. This is by Neil Vigdor and Christopher Melli from this morning. A federal drug enforcement agent was killed. Another was critically injured in a chaotic scene of gunfire aboard a crowded Amtrak train while it was stopped at a station in Tucson, Arizona on Monday morning, the city's police chief said yesterday. A city police officer was also shot and was in stable condition, Chief Magnus said at a press conference Monday afternoon. The 3 law enforcement officers, members of a joint task force from the DEA and local police, were conducting a routine sweep of the train. I'm not sure a routine sweep has the SWAT team with them, and the SWAT team was there. They were checking for illegal guns, money, and drugs, Chief Magnus said. This is something that do, as I said, routinely at pretty much all transit hubs. The gunman died in one of the train cars after barricading himself inside a bathroom, the authorities said. Though it was not clear whether he had been killed by police or had taken his own life, the other suspect was taken into custody. What set off the gunfire was not completely clear, Chief Magnus said, adding he did not know whether any guns or drugs were found by officers. Officials did not identify the officers or the 2 suspects. It was not clear if all the gunfire happened aboard the train or whether some of the shots were fired on the platform. The gunfire prompted the evacuation of the train, which was carrying 137 passengers. It began at 8 a.m. local time, while the double-decker train was stopped at a platform at the station in Tucson. Intensified 15 minutes later, live web camera footage from the Southern Arizona Transportation Museum showed. At one point, 2 bursts of at least 6 shots each sounded as 2 people who appeared to be law enforcement officers crouched behind a box on the platform. In another video from a different angle, a law enforcement officer with a police dog approached an open door of the train after the shots were fired. Moments later, the officer retreated from the train as a gunman appeared to open fire on him and the dog. Evan Courtney, 43, a passenger on the train, sent a direct message on Twitter on Monday afternoon. They went to get coffee from a cafe near the station, returned to the lounge car when people came running, shouting, "Shots fired." I grabbed my backpack and ran. Good, smart move, Mr. Courtney. An executive pastor who runs a web and graphic design agency. I looked out the window and saw a SWAT with an assault rifle huddled behind barricades. Mr. Courtney said he was traveling from L.A. to New Orleans, and the train had pulled into the Tucson station where it was supposed to be a 30-minute stop. I don't know if it stopped at Phoenix first. I think the L.A. train would probably stop at Phoenix first before going on. But in fact, the DEA has to patrol the trains because the trains are a major way for fentanyl to enter into the United States. I'm telling you this terrible story so you keep the DEA officer and the Tucson police officer in your prayer who was injured and the family and the officer who died in your prayers, but also to emphasize again that police officers confront danger every day, violent felons prepared to kill every day. The armed element of the 3% in the society willing to kill a police officer is growing in their lethal armament, not diminishing. And the idea that we ought to defund the police, a platform of the Democratic Party and Terry McAuliffe and everybody else running in Virginia who's blue, has got to be repudiated. So I'm here to tell you, especially you people in Virginia, go out today and vote for Glenn Youngkin. He's been endorsed by every major law enforcement agency in the Commonwealth of Virginia because he will not be defunding the police. Terry McAuliffe is a tool of the public school unions and of the permanent government in Virginia, will raise taxes, except he will not spend that money on the police. And you need to know that your public safety is 1 minute away. You're just riding along on a train. And how many trains have I taken in the last 5 years since I came back to D.C.? A lot. Because I go to New York on the Amtrak Acela because that's the way. Don't ever fly into LaGuardia unless someone actually has a gun to your head. You don't want to fly into LaGuardia. But you go on the Acela. So you're sitting on a train. I can see this unfolding. Along comes a dog and a cop, a DEA agent, looking for the fentanyl runners who are coming up from Sonora, Mexico, as many people Don Winslow is a great novelist of this. I don't agree with Don on anything political, but he's a great novelist of how the cartels operate. They're not going to go arrested. They're not going to go quietly, and they're not going to lose their fentanyl shipment because their boss will kill them. So they do what they do, open fire on police officers, and pretty soon you have a gunfight underway in the closed quarters of a train. Nobody expected it. Nobody went to work expecting it. A DEA agent is dead. Another is critically wounded. A Tucson police officer is wounded and in stable condition. That's the reality of law enforcement in the United States in 2021. This is not a police brutality issue. This is not a police tactic issue. It's an issue of the criminals who are willing to use lethal violence to protect what they are doing and what they are carrying. So I encourage all of you out there, support the police. And I also encourage all of you out there, go and vote for Glenn Youngkin in Virginia. And across the United States next year, remember that a 30% rise in murders in 2020 is a cause and effect from the attack on police and the retreat of police from the front lines where they are subject to harassment by activists and people who don't believe in policing. Prosecutors who don't believe in prosecuting resisting arrest, as they have in Los Angeles and San Francisco now. They don't charge it. They say it's no longer a crime. Politicized, Soros-funded prosecutors are the bane of this country. Law enforcement is the thin blue line that protects the country, and the Department of Defense is the thin blue line that protects the nation from external enemies, and Democrats are not supporting either of those. I want people to understand that in the $3.5 trillion, there is no defense spending. They want to spend more money than has ever been spent, 4 times as much as the Obama stimulus in 2009, on an unnecessary bill, not COVID relief. COVID relief passed last year and it passed early this year. Joe Biden passed $2 trillion of it. This will take the amount of spending closer to $8 trillion in 2 years of unbudgeted money. None of it has gone to defense. All of it has gone to special interest groups. Some of it has gone to PPP-eligible businesses that would otherwise have closed, and that was useful. None of it has gone to police. All of it has gone to interest groups. You can't vote for a Democrat if you want this kind of story to be a regular kind of story. In the same New York Times, there is also an interesting story. How to build resilient children. And I paused on this. The secret to raising a resilient kid. The ability to bounce back is more important now than ever. Here's how to impart it. Now, I actually raised 3 pretty successful adult kids. They're on their own. They all launched. They have great careers. 2 are married. I'll worry about the 3rd one getting married eventually. He's fine. 2 are in the service of their country in the military. 1 is in the service of the country in the government. They have ethics of service. I believe that the fetching Mrs. Hewitt gets the greatest share of credit for this because she spent a lot more time around them than I did. But raising a resilient kid means raising a child in the old-fashioned way, stressing character. I believe very, very deeply in taking a child to a church every single week. Even if you're an atheist, I happen to be a Catholic. The fetching Mrs. Hewitt a Presbyterian, so we went to Presbyterian church every single week. And they went with us, and I think that has a huge aspect in their life. I believe academic rigor. I believe in water polo, because they have to jump into a pool at 6 o'clock in the morning most of their lives, especially for young men. I really believe in water polo, but any kind of sport with coaches who insist on rigor. They don't have to be idiots. They don't have to be jerks. We were blessed with terrific coaches at every level of sport that my kids played, both my daughter and my 2 sons. They had great coaches in every sport they played. I was not among them. I am not the most gifted coach in the world. But I was in the stands. Resilient children means children of high character, children with usually a parent who is there at their games, a parent who is there at their parent-teacher conferences, a parent who is there to dress them down when they need dressing down and to build them up when they need building up. It's not a secret. This isn't rocket science. So I just encourage you to go and read that. But remember, resilient is another word for high character, moral, value-laden, ethical, strong determination, and usually with a religious structure to their life that understands that they should have a conscience and they should believe in an Almighty who created us for a purpose. Baltimore Catechism, know, love, and serve God. Let me check the markets. Brought to you by AndrewandTodd.com. Well, I don't have enough time. I'll do it after the break. It was a bad day on Wall Street yesterday, a really bad day on Wall Street. Overseas, everything is rebounding today, as it usually does the day after a sell-off in the United States. There is nothing crazy going on. You don't have to worry about that. When they pass $3.5 trillion of spending, you got to be ready for inflation. That's for sure. I'll be right back on the Tuesday edition of the Hugh Hewitt Show.
Portions of the Hugh Hewitt Show brought to you by Sierra Pacific Mortgage. For more info, call 888-888-1172.
Trending now on the Charlie Kirk Show. Dennis Prager Show. Trending now on the Charlie Kirk Show.
Instantaneous, momentary pleasure is a value the left understands that keeps their entire coalition together. And Fauci understood this. Fauci understood the zeitgeist, the spirit of the times. He understood the narrative that you do not cross that line. Now, we see this happen all the time, but we don't always talk about it. We don't always, those of us that are conservatives and actually love the country, we don't actually analyze the place that certain activist groups and ideas have over the other. Who gets the final say when there's a clash, when there's a conflict, when there's a collision? Another example would be, so the other side cares deeply about the Me Too movement unless it threatens Joe Biden becoming president. So Me Too matters a lot unless it gets in the way of controlling the White House. Power, the control of the federal government, then matters more than some sort of virtuous, righteous campaign to listen and to believe all women. Currently, there is an epic clash that the media is totally ignoring. Now, they are covering it here and there, but there is a clash between two of the favorite teams that have been created, fostered, supported, and aided over the last 18 months. You have on one side Team BLM. BLM Incorporated, racial justice, skin color matters. Now, as all of you know, after last summer of Floydapalooza, that group gets whatever they want.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today.
The Democratic Party somehow has convinced black people that they're the good guys. Never mind the skanky history of the Democratic Party. That was a party of slavery. There is a whole big cottage industry for racism. If racism went away, a lot of people would be unemployed.
The mob during the Minneapolis riots following the death of George Floyd. A bunch of white thugs, frankly, burning down the city's traditional black and Asian business district.
They're racist, racist, racist. Everything's racist.
Look for Salem Now in the App Store or go to salemnow.com.
Trending now on the Larry Elder Show.
But the first lie that we were told, the first lie that we know now, no one told Biden to keep troops in Afghanistan. That's what Biden said. Did you guys, by the way, hear the chants when Biden went to the Congressional baseball game? I don't want to go all over the place here, but that's our commander-in-chief. He didn't get a great reception. But no one told Biden to keep the troops in Afghanistan. That's huge, right? That's absolutely huge. Biden completely lied about it. The guy's a habitual liar. The first lie the senators exposed was Biden telling ABC News George Stephanopoulos back in August that no one advised him to keep 2,500 American troops in Afghanistan. And we know now every single one of them did, from Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin to the Joint Chiefs of Staff, regardless of how you feel about him and how I feel about him. Milley, the same is true with U.S. Central Command Commander General Frank McKenzie. So they all admitted that they had agreed with the recommendation to keep at least that many troops, and that they were heard by Biden and basically ignored by Biden. McKenzie admitted, I recommended that we maintain 2,500 troops in Afghanistan, and that he was confident Biden heard all of his recommendations. So the question is, did Biden forget? Did Biden just ignore? You know, sometimes I go back and forth. I'm like, okay, with this guy Biden in the White House, how is he completely off of his rocker? Is he just unable or incapable of remembering anything past a couple hours or so?
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube and at rumble.com.
Wake up, America. It's Hugh Hewitt. You should already be on your way to work unless you're in the Central or Pacific or Mountain time zones. I'm inside the Beltway. Good morning to you. I would like to remind you the Nixon Seminar is back tonight. NixonSeminar.com, chaired by former Secretary of State Mike Pompeo and co-chaired by Robert C. O'Brien, former National Security Advisor to the President. Its members are Jonathan Burks, Dr. Lonnie Chen, Christopher Nixon Cox, Dr. Monica Crowley, Congressman Mike Gallagher, Alex Gray, Mary Kissel, John Noonan, Morgan Ortegas, Matt Pottinger, Kimberly Reed, Dr. Nadia Shadlow, Congressman Michael Waltz, Christian Whitten, Alex Wong. They are the 15 bright shining stars in the national security establishment on the center right. They will be back in any Republican administration on the front bench. And tonight the topic is the Joe Biden, quote, withdrawal from Afghanistan and its consequences. We'll open with remarks from Ambassador O'Brien and Secretary of State Pompeo, and then go to the Nixon Seminar members as we puzzle through the consequences for the disaster that was the Afghanistan collapse by Joe Biden. That's tonight, 8 p.m. in the East, 5 in the West. Also want to remind you about the market report I promised you before the break. Yesterday was just simply gosh awful. This is brought to you by AndrewandTodd.com. Andrew and Todd are supporters of the program, sponsors of the program. They loan you money. I'll tell you about that in a second. But yesterday it was a wipeout. The Dow down 1% plus, I guess 0.94%, down 323 points. The S&P down 1% plus 1.3 off 58. The NASDAQ took a beating, down 311 points, which is 2%, 2.14%. Overseas this morning, though, everything is green, up to almost a percent increase in France. So I don't know what's going to happen today. I didn't know it was going to go down yesterday. I never know what. I just follow the 10-year Treasury when it comes to borrowing money to buy a house or to refinance a house. That went up yesterday to 1.481%. Time to call Andrew and Todd today. 888-888-1172. 888-888-1172. I sometimes use the single numbers for the Steelers fans out there. 888-888-1172. When you call them, you'll talk to Andrew or Todd or one of their team about how to refinance your house and save money every month, how to buy a house by getting pre-qualified, how to help your kids buy a house or your grandkids by becoming a non-occupying co-borrower. If you're a veteran, how to put nothing down. If you need a jumbo, AndrewandTodd.com is the way to go. Oil up to $81.50 a barrel today after OPEC announced it would not be increasing output. And the front page of the Wall Street Journal has some good news which I want to share with you. This is not brought to you by AndrewandTodd.com, though they love good news. This is brought to you by AstraZeneca. They said today in London that they have asked U.S. regulators for emergency authorization for an antibody drug that earlier in the year showed strong efficacy in preventing COVID symptoms. This is not the same thing as a vaccine. It's a antiviral cocktail. And it works especially for those people who cannot take vaccines because they're health impaired. People who suffer from chronic diseases and other conditions that render vaccines less effective. Emergency use authorization is going to be sought by the FDA. Hopefully the FDA has not retreated into pre-Trump bureaucratic confusion, impotence, and immobility. Hopefully they're still acting like this is an emergency, because for those who can't get the vaccine, it is an emergency. They've wanted something. AstraZeneca has come up with this antibody viral cocktail, and it will prevent even the symptoms of COVID. The company said that 3/4 of the 5,197 participants in the trial had comorbidities or chronic disease, and in 90% of the people in the trial, the symptomatic spread of COVID was prevented. It's asymptomatic. It means you get it, but you don't even know you have it. You don't even have a head cold. Listen to me. Get vaccinated. If you don't get vaccinated because of a comorbidity, help is on the way if the FDA does its job. I'll talk to Tom Cotton about the FDA, about the retirement announcement of Dr. Collins from the NIH today, Dr. Fauci's walk back of Christmas being canceled. Didn't want to be the Grinch. She walked that back. About last week and about reconciliation. Don't go anywhere. Senator Cotton, followed by Victor Davis Hanson, coming up on the Hugh Hewitt Show.
Portions of the Hugh Hewitt Show are brought to you in part by Simon & Schuster's Enemy at the Gates, the latest in the Vince Flynn series by Kyle Mills.
trending now on The Eric Metaxas Show.
There are people today who seem emboldened in wielding naked power, in lying. They don't seem to have the code. They don't believe in virtue. They believe in power, and they seem less troubled. The journalistic class, the medical establishment, they seem to have come unmoored.
We're not alone. We have history to guide us, and it has been a trademark across time and space that the left feels that the means that you talked about are justified by their more noble ends, nobility defined as radical equality of result. And so they feel that what you call lying, the Russian collusion hoax, or Joe Biden, that son Hunter's laptop is Russian disinformation, or Anthony Fauci saying I had no role in the gain-of-function research subsidies. All of that is okay because the ultimate end, that is making sure that the, quote, people are equal or that they're fair, it justifies them. And they feel that they have a right that you and I don't have as superior moral beings to use. They don't call it lying, they call it a noble lie. When Anthony Fauci says on one day, don't wear a mask, then wear a mask, then wear two masks, or it's xenophobic to have a travel ban, yes, or then maybe not, he said himself that he lied about masks so there wouldn't be a quote unquote run on mask. And they've been doing that with everything. If you said, why did James Clapper lie under oath and say this NSA does not spy on people?
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe today at rumble.com.
Streaming on Salem Now.
The public would be outraged if they knew the truth.
Why do you think our politicians are not on the sidewalk right now talking to you?
Don't have no respect.
The old wall randomly turns into a guardrail, followed by miles of open border.
Human trafficking gone.
That journey is extremely dangerous.
The 7-year-old girl died in the desert.
From the country of India.
A great pillar of the community was killed by a man who had been deported at least twice.
This little urn contains the ashes of my son. His dreams cut short forever.
We're so worried about other countries' problems, and we don't even focus on our own.
Look for Salem Now in the App Store or go to salemnow.com.
Trending now on America First with Sebastian Gorka.
Mark Milley admitted yesterday that for that pathetic pseudo-journalist Bob Woodward, for his new blockbuster dishing book of scandal, Mark Milley gave him hours of interviews. Hours? Sorry. How busy should the chairman of the Joint Chiefs be? Just curious. As the Taliban is ready to take back Afghanistan, these are interviews he gave this stinking year. This year. As the Taliban is rising, as China is building its military, as Iran is threatening us, as Russia is being ever more militaristic, you're sitting down for hours with an avowed, rabid Democrat, quote-unquote, journalist to give inside scoops on how you stood up to President Trump by undermining the chain of command that you by the Constitution are not a part of? What the hell are you doing? Maybe those hours could have been spent, I don't know, reading the Long War Journal by our friend Bill Roggio, where he predicted in March that the Taliban would be in control and Kabul would fall. Maybe you would better spend your time reading books like Cynical Theories, reading the works of Chris Rufo about what critical race theory really is and why it's racism and bigotry. But oh no, you had to be a...
Subscribe today at rumble.com.
The Democratic
Trending
Party somehow
now.
has convinced black people that they're the good guys. Never mind the skanky history of the Democratic Party. That was a party of slavery.
He said, listen, I gotta give these niggas enough. And I Not too much, but enough that I have them voting Democrat for the next 200 years.
The race grievance industry would have you believe that blacks get up and think about nothing else except race.
If I tell you this is racist, yeah, I would get you emotional.
There is a whole big cottage industry for racism. If racism went away, a lot of people would be unemployed.
The mob during the Minneapolis riots following the death of George Floyd. A bunch of white thugs, frankly, burning down the city's traditional black and Asian business district.
They're racist, 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 racist. Everything's racist.
Look for Salem Now in the App Store or go to Salem.
Welcome back, America. Hugh Hewitt inside the Beltway Live, joined by United States Senator Tom Cotton. I almost played The Devil Goes Down to Georgia after what happened to Arkansas when they played Georgia this week, but I decided not to embarrass my friend, Senator Cotton, by bringing up the 37-0 shellacking that Georgia administered to the Razorbacks this week, and I'm sorry about that, Senator.
Well, Hugh, it was certainly an outstanding game by the Bulldogs, one of America's storied and premier college teams, and hats off to them, but we hope that we'll right the ship this weekend against Auburn. Still very proud of the great start the Razorbacks are off to.
They are. They're still ranked. They are ranked number 13 in the AP. I have raised a question today, Senator Cotton, which I'm going to share with you because you occasionally watch college football. Of the 25 ranked teams in the AP, only 2 are from fully blue states, Oregon at number 8 and falling, and San Diego State at number 25. A couple are from the blue parts of purple states like Michigan and Penn State. Penn State's from the red start of a blue state. Why do you think that 21 out of 25 ranked colleges are in red states?
I don't know, Hugh. That's a good question. I mean, some of it has to do probably with the concentration of Democrats in New England, which has never been a hotbed of college football. New England's always really the Mid-Atlantic and New England always been more about professional sports than college sports. And I don't think anyone who's ever been to an Eagles game or a Giants game or a Pats game and say they don't have enthusiasm for football, but they've just never really had major college programs up in that part of the country.
Here's my theory for you, that the red states produce colleges, especially land-grant colleges, which are the least woke colleges in the university and least threatened by superb college coaches who actually act in a very masculine way, in a manly way, as Harvey Manfield would put it, and that they are not threatened by woke faculty or woke administrators. They're more comfortable in red states. And so red states over time attract better athletes who have to live in a hyper-masculine world of the NFL if they want to play professionally. What do you think of my theory?
It's very deep, Hugh. You should have Harvey Mansfield on to discuss a theory like that.
I have Victor Davis Hanson coming up. I'll check with him next, because his new book, The Dying Citizen, is where I want to go next. Victor Davis Hanson thinks citizenship is on the ropes. What do you think, Senator Cotton?
Yeah, so I read a preprint of that and highly commended it. I think all of Victor's work is outstanding, and I commend all of his books. But I do think that we need to resurrect the idea of an active citizenry. And it does make a difference to be a citizen as opposed to, say, a foreigner or subject. And that is central to the thinking of our founders. Citizen and city all come from the same root words. They all get back to man's natural condition of living in community with others, trying to achieve the highest goods, and that's what politics at its best aims for. So I think Victor's book is very timely.
Yeah, he draws a distinction between citizen and resident, which is very important. And I'll be talking with him after the break about why the generals turned against Trump and other key issues. But I wanted to know that you knew the book was out there, and not only do you know it, you've read it. That's, of course, not surprising to me. Let me go to the Senate, Senator Cotton. Mitch McConnell has said repeatedly for, I think, 4 months that the Republicans will not join in raising the debt limit. Senators were attacked by President Biden twice yesterday in under 3 minutes in pretty vicious terms. What did you make of Joe Biden's narrative, which is as false as the day is long?
Hugh, Joe Biden conveniently omitted that he voted against 3 debt ceiling increases during the Bush era. And he also conveniently omitted that the Democrats have in their power to pass this bill on a party line basis. And if the Democrats want to spend $7 trillion on a party line basis, then they can borrow that money on a party line basis as well. I don't know how Mitch McConnell can be even any more clearer. He's been saying now for 3 months, Hugh, that the Republicans are not going to provide votes to raise the debt ceiling when the Democrats have made it clear that they want to spend that money on a reckless party line basis. This is Mitch McConnell who's leading the Senate Republicans on this matter. It's not some backbench firebrand senator. It is Mitch McConnell. The Democrats have spent years calling him the Grim Reaper of the Senate, and now they're acting surprised that the Grim Reaper is killing their bad ideas. But that's what the Grim Reaper does.
And very effectively, and bravo for him.
And they need to get moving on the relatively straightforward process that would allow them to increase the debt ceiling by a simple majority vote. They should have started moving on it a month ago, but it's well past time for them to get off the dime and take responsibility for the trillions of dollars they're trying to spend this year. If they want to spend the money, but they don't want to borrow it, that is the ultimate example, as the scripture says, of eating and swallowing camels with choking on gnats.
Now, I want to ask, Senator, why you think they are so opposed to just do it. They're risking falling into the abyss of default, although I think that risk is somewhere further out than October 18th. Why do you think they are so reluctant, and why do you think they want to harry the Republicans unsuccessfully into allowing them a bipartisan vote on raising the debt limit? What is the political downside to them?
I think there's a couple reasons, Hugh. First is that the White House, and Joe Biden repeated it yesterday, has developed this silly talking point that the $5 trillion bill will cost nothing. It costs zero. And if they have to increase the debt ceiling by $4, $5, $6 trillion, it gives the lie that that's the point. Second, the Democrats, especially in the House, not the moderate Democrats, there are no moderate Democrats left, only vulnerable Democrats, they don't want to have their fingerprints on a party line debt ceiling increase because they know the voters will hold them accountable for it. And I'd probably add a third reason, Hugh, now that I think about it. It would appear, based on Senate customs and precedents, that the debt ceiling cannot be suspended using the budget practices. In the last 10 years, in the 7 or 8 years I've been in the Congress, I think the debt ceiling has typically been suspended to a date certain as opposed to increased by a dollar amount. But using the budgetary practices the Democrats are using right now for their spending bill, it would appear that they have to increase it by a certain number. So rather than they suspend it to next December, they have to vote on a specific dollar amount. And again, I think those vulnerable Democrats are very wary at the time they're spending $7 trillion on a party line basis to also increase the debt ceiling by $7 trillion.
I would add a fourth reason. They have to do another vote-a-rama. Would you explain what a vote-a-rama is if, in fact, they use reconciliation, which they have to do? I don't think the Republicans care what Joe Biden says.
I am less convinced at that point, Hugh, for the following reason. So when you go through these special budgetary practices, we do have what's called vote-a-rama. And they call it that because, in general, it takes a lot of cooperation from both sides to get amendments up for a vote in the Senate. The only time that's not the case is when you're passing a budget bill. And then you have unlimited amendments for an unlimited amount of time. The only limitations are exhaustion. And that's why these vote-a-ramas typically run through the middle of the night, sometime well overnight and into Saturday, as they have earlier this year. But what the Democrats would be doing here is only amending their previous budget, and probably only amending it with a one-page bill to say, increase the debt ceiling by X trillion dollars. That has an amendment like that, as opposed to a budget itself, takes less time, and there are fewer amendments that can be crafted that are germane to it. So I know that Joe Biden is out there saying we'll take hundreds of votes to do this. That's not the case. Republicans will probably have a few budget votes that we are going to have, but I don't foresee Republicans, have going through 2 of these vote-a-ramas voting overnight. That's why there's more than enough time to get it done by October 18th, or whatever the real so-called X date turns out to be. If as it appears, Janet Yellen may have been hiding the ball somewhat on October 18th as the so-called X date.
The X date is the date on which the United States would default on one of its obligations for failure to borrow the money it needs to print in order to pay them. What do you think is the X date, Senator Cotton?
So the Treasury itself said that October 8th was the earliest in various scenarios. Most private analyses push it back at least, 4 or 5 days. Some push it back all the way to the end of October. The Democrats, though, should not be toying with this matter when they have the means at hand to pass this. And again, it's not just Mitch McConnell saying, well, there's this obscure budgetary practice that allows you to pass it on a party line basis. No, they are actually using those budgetary practices right now. They're literally writing a bill with it. So it is right and timely for them to take this approach.
Do they lose a bullet in their holster if they amend the reconciliation? Someone proposed earlier today one of their reluctances is they only get one reconciliation a year. I don't think they actually waste that reconciliation with this. Am I wrong?
No, in fact, the irony here is that Chuck Schumer went to the parliamentarian earlier this year to try to get approval for using one budget to pass multiple bills. And the parliamentarian said, yes, under certain circumstances, that could be approved. And it looks like the only thing for which that'll have to be used this year is the Senate's Democrats passing a party line debt ceiling increase. So I would say Chuck Schumer there was hoist on his own petard, as is so often the case.
So to close this out, we're almost out of time. There is no reason the Democrats cannot move. They have not yet begun to move, and the deadline, which is critical for the United States, draws closer. Fair summary?
Absolutely fair to you.
Senator Tom Cotton, always good to talk to you, whether about The Dying Citizen by VDH or about college football. Remember my theory, red states are the least woke, and that's why red states have the best college football. Take that to the Senate floor. I want to remind all of you as well that ReliefFactor.com is a sponsor of this show. There it is, ReliefFactor.com. I take it every single morning on the first hour of this program, and then I remind you in hours 2 and 3 because some of you are just leaving for work on the West Coast. Others of you are lounging around the house and working from home and wondering why your hamstring hurts. And some of you are professional athletes and you need to get over it quicker. Take the 4 supplements, the only supplements I take. ReliefFactor.com is Icarian, curcumin, resveratrol, and omega, all with clinical studies supporting their anti-inflammatory characteristics. And that's what keeps you moving. Doesn't hurt. You even something as simple as reaching for the peanut butter. Do not give in to pain. Get relief with ReliefFactor.com. $19.95 gets you started. I also want to put a pitch in, a very serious request, begging you actually, to keep Alliance Defending Freedom in the field of fight. Alliance Defending Freedom is running their annual fundraiser right now. If you go over to HughHewitt.com, you can find the website by letting it load at the very top. And your contribution in any amount is deeply appreciated. The Supreme Court returned yesterday Amy Coney Barrett in her chair for the first time at the front of the 9. There are 6 conservatives. I believe Roe v. Wade will be reversed. I believe Casey v. Planned Parenthood will be reversed. And a new rational basis test adopted for state laws affecting abortion, and only the irrational ones will be struck down. And so states will be returned to their right to control the life of another human being once that life has assumed heartbeat status or the ability to suffer pain. That's what I believe is going to happen, but ADF is going to have to argue it. They're also going to have to protect free speech across the United States whenever it is threatened. In fact, I got a note from Alliance Defending Freedom suggesting that I tell the story of Lydia. Lydia was obliged to wear a mask to school. She complied. She wore the mask that Jesus loves me. And her teachers told her, lose the mask. Get a different mask. Here's what happened next, and Lydia tells us.
Well, this mask I had said Jesus loves me, and in the beginning of school, nobody said anything about it. Well, later on, the computer teacher said I couldn't wear that type of mask.
That was a 3rd grader in Mississippi. A 3rd grader in Mississippi. So religious freedom is under assault everywhere. If everyone's going to wear masks with different signs on them, a religious mask gets protected. ADF won that case. They win almost everything they bring, but they need you to help them. You can call in a donation to 866-359-9644, 866-359-9644, or go to HughHewitt.com. Victor Davis Hanson is next.
Portions of the Hugh Hewitt Show are brought to you by Alliance Defending Freedom.
Trending now on The Mike Gallagher Show.
Look around. You are witnessing a shameful part of history that is unfolding in the United States of America. We've got a president who was caught in a bald-faced lie about withdrawing from Afghanistan. We've got a general announcing to the world that we have utterly and completely failed. We have a general on record announcing to the world that we are guilty of a major failure.
It was a logistical success, but a strategic failure.
General Milley admitting that he was leaking and giving intel to book authors about Donald Trump. This is a guy who so far has had zero accountability. Joe Biden, the president of the United States, has had zero accountability. Let's go back to what he said to George Stephanopoulos a few weeks ago, and then we'll take you to the present and yesterday's explosive, dramatic testimony by military commanders over the shameful, unethical, unforgivable lies coming out of the Biden administration and Joe Biden himself. Here he was with George Stephanopoulos a month ago on ABC.
Your top military advisors warned against withdrawing on this timeline. They wanted you to keep about 2,500 troops.
No, they didn't. It was split. That wasn't true.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube and at rumble.com. Trending now on The Charlie Kirk Show.
When there is a clash on the left between separate preferred activist groups, who gets preference? Who wins? Now, on the left, they have a hierarchy, not any different than a hierarchy that you'd have in any sort of organization. You see, when the left has a moment of disagreement or conflict, it is very important to realize that there is a structure of what matters more than something else. I wrote a piece for humanevents.com where I wrote, it was literally called, "This Matters More, Very Promiscuous Relationships." And Fauci said, well, you have to understand there's some risk to that. He didn't denounce it because he understood that if he came out against promiscuous behavior for young people, there'd be a revolution.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube.
Welcome back, America. I'm Hugh Hewitt. The interview with Hugh Hewitt today is with Victor Davis Hanson, Senior Fellow in Military History at the Hoover Institution at Stanford University, Professor Emeritus in the Classics at Cal State University. Victor, welcome back. It's great to see you again.
Good to see you, Hugh.
I'd like to tell people I was reading Victor Davis Hanson before George W. Bush was 20 years ago, and he's been a guest on my show for 21 years. His new book, The Dying Citizen, if people were listening to the show just now, was just endorsed by Tom Cotton, who has read the whole thing. I've read the introduction, the conclusion, and Chapter 4 on tribes. I have not had enough time to read the entire thing, Victor, but there's lots to read here. The Dying Citizen is not happy talk, is it?
No, it's not, unfortunately. It was written right before these catastrophic series of events in that terrible year of 2020, and I finished it in the middle of it, and then I wrote an afterword at the end of the year. Yeah, so it was.
I read the epilogue, and I read with particular gusto the conclusion of the epilogue, which I want people to hear now, because you don't conclude with despair. Despair is a sin, and you don't indulge it. You conclude with resilience. As 2021 began, the supporters of restoring the primacy of American citizen were not so confident in their own powers of renovation as they were convinced that they had no other choice but to keep trying. The stakes were no less than the preservation of the American Republic itself. I don't believe that's overstatement, Victor Davis Hanson. Why did you choose to close on that note?
Well, I'm optimistic, for all of Trump's foibles, by 2020, say January, if you and I were having this discussion, we would say the border is finally closed. It's legal, meritocratic, diverse, and limited immigration. And we would say that abroad, we have restored deterrence without a need for optional military major engagements. And we would say that for the first time in 12 years, the middle class actually had an increase in real income. And we would say that we finally address asymmetries in the post-global trading and commercial order. And I would say that people had, for the first time in my life, addressed this administrative state, this judge, jury, executioner, huge bureaucracy. And we weren't talking about ending the Electoral College or packing the court or getting rid of the filibuster. And this was the first time in my life we also questioned the International Criminal Court seriously, or the UN lecturing us on racism or Israel's illiberality. So there was a sense that America wasn't just rhetorically exceptional, but we had more faith in us and our medical system, to take one example, than the WHO. And that seems to have been lost that terrible year, 2020.
I agree with that assessment. I also believe it was the first year prior to 2020 when we had begun to confront the People's Republic of China's Chinese Communist Party. Now, that might be the one happy result of the virus, is that we understand them to be a lethal agent on the world stage, not that we've acted on it. But I want to begin in the middle and then go to the beginning. I told you I read Tribes because I'm particularly interested in one aspect of The Dying Citizen, which is the politicization of retired generals. I happen to know General Mattis, as do you. I know General McChrystal. I know over the radio the former head of the SEALs, Admiral McRaven. I know a lot of these people, and I admire them greatly, as I know you do, General Mattis. But you comment on their almost uniform critique of President Trump, and that goes to Barry McCaffrey as well, who I follow on Twitter, and he follows me, and many other generals. I have a theory, Victor, why this has happened. I want to test it out on you. The generals and the admirals, general officers, come up through decades where fit reps are part of their promotion, fitness reps. They are graded continually, usually once a year at a minimum, sometimes twice a year. So they have to be fit for their next promotion and their achievement. I believe most of these generals and admirals did not believe that President Trump was aesthetically or temperamentally fit for the office, despite his policy preferences, and that they were incapable of understanding that the essential American right is to choose people without regard to resume. And they reject that. What do you think of my assessment of why there is this aesthetic distaste for the former president among the general officers?
I think it's a tangent to what I wrote in the book and what I do believe, and I think it's similar in some ways to you. I think to get promoted in today's politically correct environment or landscape, you don't get promoted for how many shells hit the target or how many pilots landed on the first try on a carrier, but race and gender issues more. And more importantly, that Washington nexus now, where people at lieutenant colonel and colonel and one-star get posted, acculturates that officer corps to the following you, that they know that the right and the conservatives will always back the military, or so they think, but the left won't. And so they reach out and they really say to the left, we can fast-track transgender soldiers or gay marriage or women in combat units or pregnancy suits in a way that gets rid of the legislative mess of give and take because of our chain of command. And the left now has actually welcomed these generals. And then a final twist to that is when they go out, and remember they have been going in and out to Raytheon, General Dynamics, Lockheed, Northrop, then those corporations also have a similar culture. And if they were going to be outspoken on just, doesn't have to be politically outspoken, but just one-dimensionally military and not social justice voices and megaphones, I think that their post-retirement careers would be in danger.
That is very well articulated. I go on my tangent. I believe, because I know one of them very well, who told me personally that it was a character issue with him before Trump ran. That it simply could not accept the character defects in the president as acceptable in the commander-in-chief, that they would not be accepted in any general officer.
The reason I
gather.
Because there's the Uniform Code of Military Justice, Article 88, says that no top-ranking officer, retired or acting, can